10 minutes, more than 10 minutes delay.
I'll start, Dr. Sharda.
Yeah.
I'll start the session. Yeah. Good afternoon. I'm Malti Kembavi from Population First. On behalf of my team, we welcome all the speakers and participants for the Day 2 Orientation Program for Laadli Media Fellowship 2022. The fellowship program is being supported by UNFPA India and the Royal Norwegian Embassy in New Delhi. Yesterday, we gained a perspective on various aspects of gender, patriarchy, and how to report of gender-based violence and people with disability. Today, we have a stellar panel of speakers, and it will be another day of interesting conversations and learnings for all our participants. Before I formally begin the session, I would like to quickly put down some guidelines. May I please request all my participants to keep their audio on mute and videos on. Feel free to use the chat box for your questions or raise your hand if you want to share a question. Please note, we have a dedicated question answer session after each session for the participants. I would now like to invite Dr. Sharda to make her opening remarks for day 2. Over to you, Dr. Sharda.
Thank you, Malti. Thanks. I warmly welcome each and every one of you. It's so nice to see some known faces, some winners, some people about whom we have heard. And I'm feeling a little sad that I'm not able to meet you in person, but I'm sure it is going to be a short time. This thing, and next session we'll definitely have an offline session. And I'm so glad today we have 3 amazing people joining us as panelists. We have Sridhar Rangayan, who's a gay rights activist. Correct me if I have said some. A gay rights activist, and he's very, very well known, and Kashish Film Festival, so many things, Pride Parades, and it is the kind of work he has done to bring these issues into the mainstream is really, really admirable. And I'm so happy, so glad that we have him with us today. And we are going to be joined by Kalpana Apte, who is Director General of Family Planning Association of India, and she'll be talking about sexual reproductive health, particularly about abortion rights and sex selection and surrogacy, etc. I know the time slots given to each of the speakers is very short. 40 minutes mein kitna bol sakenge, kitna gyan baant sakenge. So that's a big thing, but I'm sure they will do their best to give you the most important nuggets of information and knowledge. And we have Lakshmi Sreenivasan, who will be talking about inclusivity in inclusion in content. How do we make our content more inclusive? So these are the 3 speakers we have, and as we have mentioned, all those who attend this workshop are expected to send us 4 storylines. Either you can send on one subject, one topic, you can send 4 storylines, like on disability. You want to do a series of stories, you can do that, or you can pick up 4 different topics from, from each of the subjects that you have. We have covered in this workshop. And remember, you have to get us undertaking from the editor that the article will be published, because that's very important. If you write a very great article but you don't find a publisher for that, it makes no sense. So you have to get it published, this thing from the publisher, that your story will be published. So this is something which is very, very important. And I hope all of you are taking notes. It's very important. As I said yesterday, taking notes is very important, because when we listen, we find everything is very good. I understood everything. But after half an hour, we'll forget. So it is important to write down the points, something which appeals to you, something which is new, some data that is being shown. You have to make notes. Even if you share the recording, you still have to take notes, I feel, because that's how you actually get the information into understanding into your system. So please take notes meticulously, and then ask questions. Make the conversation very interesting. There's no right or wrong question. If you have a question, you are entitled to ask it, and we, as far as possible, we'll try to answer the question. But the thing is that for a lively conversation, it is important to be open and discuss freely whatever questions, apprehensions, fears that we have within us with regard to what kind of stories to write, how to write, and then whether they'll be accepted or not. All these things are there in our minds, and it's nice to discuss them in the group with the resource person. So I welcome all of you once again, and thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dr. Sharda. I would now like to invite our first panelist, Mr. Sridhar Rangayan, who is a filmmaker, writer, activist, film festival jury, and festival director. His award-winning films, The Pink Mirror, Yours Emotionally, Purple Skies, Breaking Free, and even Shadows are at the forefront of India's emergent queer cinema. He is the founder, festival director of Kashish Mumbai, an international queer film festival. He's a founder trustee of the Humsafar Trust and founding facilitator of Swikar, the Rainbow Parents, a support group for parents of LGBTQ children. He will take us through a session on LGBTQ and what it takes to produce sensitive report. Thank you, Sridhar, for being with us today. Over to you.
I think you're mute, Sridhar.
Sorry, my yeah. So thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this conference with a lot of journalists. So I hope I know some of them, maybe they know me, and I hope to interact with all of you in future. So just to rewind back to my own apprehensions about LGBTQ ideas, I came out to myself in 1990. I was a very late bloomer. I was like 27 years old when I came out to myself as a gay man. So that's when the first edition of Bombay Dose, which is India's first gay newsletter, was published. And one of my friends gave me the copy, and I was horrified because what was so personal being a gay man, or at that one time, the word gay was also not in my mind, about a man who desired other men. And here was this magazine, Bombay Dose, which basically publicly acknowledged this particular desire. And for me, it was horrific. I mean, how can you just talk about something so personal, so publicly? But when I read the magazine from front page to back page, I was a transformed man. I realized that my personal has to become political. But it still took me a year more for me to come out to my closest friends. And but I joined Bombay Dose as a writer and a designer. That was in 1991. And 1994, I joined hands with Ashok Kavi and Suhail Abbasi to set up Humsafar Trust, which is India's first registered gay organization. Now, of course, it's branched out and is considered an LGBTQ organization. But at that time, when we started it, it was basically a gay organization. So right now, I mean, I'm using these terms, gay, LGBTQ, LGBTQIA+. So what does it mean? Let's go back and talk about it a little bit. I hope it's okay that I'm speaking in English because that's a language which I'm comfortable with. But if anybody wants to basically ask questions in Hindi, they're welcome per se. I'll be able to answer in a bit of a broken Hindi, but I'll be able to do that. So 1994, I set up Humsafar Trust. And then, of course, like, I mean, I continued. Then 2001, I set up Solaris Pictures along with my partner, Sagar Gupta. So we started producing LGBTQ films because there was hardly any LGBTQ films being made then in 2001. And over the last 20 years, I've been produced as Malti ji already read out the bio. We have produced around 6 or 7 feature films under our production banner. And in 2010, we started Kashish Mumbai International Queer Film Festival, being one of the first mainstream LGBTQ film festival to be held in theatrical space. And we have been doing it for the last 12 years. So that's a small bio of my own, where I come from and what it is. But to move on to what LGBTQ ideas are per se, I want to share a few slides with you to delineate. I mean, there's too much of confusion. Somebody says gay, somebody says asexual, somebody says queer. What are these terms? So let's just take a look at a couple of slides to understand what this all means. So I'm going to basically share a slide right now. So this is called genderbread person, like gingerbread kind of thing. So genderbread person. So all of us are composed of these elements. Sex is something which we are born with as a male or a female or a intersex or a trans person. So sex is something we are born with. Then expression, we could I could be born a male person, but I can be more feminine in my expression. I can express myself by wearing costumes which are traditionally assigned to women. So my expression of a gender is something which defines who I am. Then identity, that's an identity. If you, once, let me just, how do I? Okay, so you can see now, identity is how you in your head experience and define your gender based on how much you align or don't align with what you understand the options for gender to be. Then attraction, you could be a homosexual person, you could be a heterosexual person, you could be a bisexual person, who you're attracted to, romantically, sexually, who are you attracted to? So these are the four identities which define every person. So that's one of the things I just want to talk about. And one second. Yeah. So this again similar. That's a gender-bread person. There's a gender unicorn. So again, the same thing. Gender identity. You could be a female, woman, girl, male, man, boy, other genders. Gender expression. You can express yourself as a feminine person or a masculine person or a queer person. Sex assigned at birth: female, male, other, intersex. Physically attracted to: women, men, other. Emotionally attracted to: you can be physically attracted or emotionally attracted. So we come to some of those aspects later. Now, what is the terms? Let's look at this. This is a very broad term. Okay, lesbian, a woman who is primarily attracted to women. Gay, a man who is primarily attracted to men. Sometimes a broad term for individuals primarily. So you can say gay for, it used to be an umbrella term for everybody who's attracted to the opposite sex, for the same sex, attracted to the same sex earlier. But right now it's more defined. Gay is only for men who are attracted to men. Bisexual, an individual attracted to people of their own and opposite gender. A lot of people confuse bisexuality. People say that you are confused, you don't know which way to go. Sometimes you're attracted to man, sometimes you're attracted to woman. But bisexuality is innate. Like as much as heterosexuality is innate, bisexuality is also innate. And you can be definitely attracted sexually or romantically to people of both the genders. The transgender, a person whose gender identity differs from their assigned sex at birth. So if I was assigned male at birth, but I feel like a female outside, so that's a transgender person. Again, transsexual is somebody, an outdated term that originated in the medical and psychological communities for people who have permanently changed their gender identity through surgery or hormones. Nowadays, transsexual is not being used as a word. Transgender is an umbrella term for all these identities. Then queer, an umbrella term to be more inclusive of many identities and variations that make up the LGBTQ plus community. Questioning, the process of exploring and discovering one's own sexual orientation, gender identity, and or gender expression. Intersex, an individual whose sexual anatomy or chromosome do not fit with the traditional markers of female and male. So there are quite a few people who are intersex, but let's not confuse them with other people. Ally, typically a non-queer person who supports and advocates for the queer community and individual within the LGBTQ plus community, can be an ally for another member that identifies differently than them. Asexual, there's a very misunderstood identity within the LGBTQ spectrum. An individual who generally does not feel sexual desire or attraction to any group of people. It is not the same as celibacy. Remember, you can be celibate, but you can not, that need not be asexual. Pansexual, a person who experiences sexual, romantic, physical, and or spiritual attraction to members of all gender identities, expressions, not just people who fit into the standard gender binary. So just remember these. And also there's one important identity which is not in this particular thing because it's a download from an international website, H for hijra. So hijra is an identity by itself. So let's not confuse them with intersex or transgender or bisexual or queer people. Hijra is an identity, particularly in India and some of the South Asian countries. So I would like to put LGBTQIA plus, IAQH plus. That's what I would like to use usually. Then sexual orientation scale, this could be very confusing. We don't have to go into this, but just to mention these things, words, pansexual, attracting to any gender, gender does not play a primary role in attraction. Omnisexual, attraction to any gender, gender can play a primary role in attraction. Polysexual, attraction to 3 or more genders, many but not all genders. Bisexual, attraction to 2 or more genders, often the same gender. Homosexual, heterosexual, we already know that. Ace, flux, demisexual, gray sexual, asexual. There's so many sexualities. So I would say that like these are not, these have always existed in our communities, in our society. Only now they've been named. So let's not think that these are sprung out of nowhere and it's a fiction of people's imagination. You people are basically promoting and making more LGBTQ people. No, that's not true. That's been the accusation earlier when we were in the 90s and the 2000s. Whenever we spoke about being gay or homosexual, people felt that we are there to convert other people. That's not true. Why would I convert anybody if I myself have suffered so much as a gay man? So as a gay man growing up in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, I faced violence. I faced blackmail by hustlers. So, and also like, I've been a victim to police. So these are the things which basically affect you and leave a scar in your mind all the time. And most of the LGBTQ persons from my generation have these scars which never heal. The younger people right now, of course, they have their own scars, they have their own battles, but at least the law is on their side. Section 377 has been read down in 2018, September. And that's been a great victory for us, something which we fought for last 30 years. So, but the thing is like, what was, yeah, so there's a couple of things we need to figure out about what was, why did the LGBTQ community remain underground for a long time? One is, of course, like the law, Section 377, which criminalized homosexuality and any form of non-peno-vaginal sex per se, not just homosexuality, but anything which was non-reproductive, non-peno-vaginal sex was criminalized under Section 377. So there was a 30-year-old battle challenge to it. And basically in 2018, 2009, Delhi High Court read it down. And 2013, the Supreme Court reinstated it. And 2018, finally, it was read down, and I hope it will never come back, Section 377. So right now, basically, it's legal to be a homosexual or a gay man or a lesbian woman or a transgender person. And also, one of the important verdicts by the Supreme Court has been something called NALSA judgment, basically, which gave transgender persons their identity. That was in 2014, NALSA judgment. So right now, also, there's a trans bill which was passed in the government, basically, in the assembly, which gives a transgender person their right. So you can say that I'm a transgender person. I have a right to self-determine my gender expression, my identity. So you don't have to be, earlier there was this whole context that like a trans person is to be examined by a team of doctors to certify that they're trans. That's not there anymore. So you can say that I'm a trans person and you should be accepted as a trans person. One of the important things to understand is also the pronouns, okay? You usually, like when you look at a person who's a kind of a cis male kind of person, you would immediately assume that like, I need to address that person as he or him. That may not be the case, right? I might be presenting myself right now as a cis male person, but I could be feeling like a trans person. So you should always ask for the pronouns. So the pronouns for a male is like he and him and she and her, and for trans and queer and questioning people is they and them. So you need to ask the person for their proper pronoun before addressing them. That shows your respect for the different genders. So it could be in any conversation, in your office, at home, in a cafe. I would say that don't address a person by the appearance, he, she. So I would say ask for the pronoun or avoid using a pronoun at all. You can do that easily. You can just say, how are you, Sridhar, if you know the name, or that's the way. So ask for the pronoun or try not to use a wrong pronoun, because it's very, very traumatic if you are, if you're a transgender person, if you have left your previous gender behind and you're addressed with that particular gender and you're sometimes dead naming that person, it could be very traumatic. So avoid using wrong pronouns. That's the thing. And apart from the law, the society has been very kind of has been one of the biggest factor for pushing the LGBTQ people underground. So India traditionally has been a patriarchal society. So patriarchy basically pulls down anything which is non-cis heterosexual male a person. So women also been within a patriarchal society. Women also have been pushed underground, and of course, all the LGBTQIA identities have been pushed underground. So that is changing slowly. Hopefully, it will change very soon. But I've seen changes in my lifetime where, at least in the metro cities, it's much more acceptable to be an out and proud LGBTQIA plus person. But of course, when you go to the smaller towns and the villages, it's more challenging. But sometimes I also find that it's more acceptable in villages. People innately accept you. They don't need this tags of LGBTQIA plus, etc. They don't question the gender and sexual identities. They just innately accept. I've seen trans people being accepted innately by their family members. But still, we have a long way to go because I think the society and the family structures in India still are still very patriarchal largely. And they are very, very complicating to LGBTQI persons. So especially during the lockdown, it was very difficult for people who assume a different identity to be staying with their parents and not being able to express their identity. Because if you feel like you want to dress differently and you are stuck at home and you're not able to dress the way you want, or you are not able to behave the way you want, and that would be causing a lot of mental anguish and trauma. So mental health of LGBTQ persons are a big concern for all of us per se. So we need to basically look at the mental health. So these are some of the things you need to really talk about as journalists. So what happens is we are still stuck with the coming out ideas, oh, this person has come out, let's do a story on that person. But I need to really focus on the larger spectrum. As I said, gay men have been written about a lot, lesbian women, a little bit more. But what about bisexuality? What about intersex? What about queer? What about non-binary NB persons? People who do not identify as either male or female, non-binary persons, queer, asexual, intersex. These are the marginalized identities within the LGBTQIA spectrum, which definitely need more focus. And also, I think the reporting has to be also, I think we don't have enough words in the local languages, in the regional languages. So a lot of times the English becomes the dominant language across board, and we don't have enough words in the Indian languages. So we have compiled a glossary of terms in Hindi. I'll share that with Dr. Sharda, and she can send it to you people. I don't have it right now here with me, but there's all these LGBTQIA terms have been kind of defined in Hindi. But what about other languages? Tamil, Kannada, Telugu, Malayalam, Bengali, Marathi. We need these terminologies in all these things. The other thing is when you're presenting a story about a gay man or a LGBTQ person, their identity should be part of the larger story. So if you're reporting about me speaking in this particular workshop, I would like you to say that Sridhar Rangayan, a filmmaker who is also gay, not necessarily a gay filmmaker, I would like that to be there. My main identity is a human being. My secondary identity is a filmmaker. My third identity is that I'm a gay man. So you need to be more sensitive about how you report. Also when you report about a murder, gay man murders wife. No, a man murders a wife and he happens to be gay. There's a different structuring. That's what I'm saying. You can say the same story in 100 different ways, but the way you choose it shows your sensitivity. And usually there have been, especially in the initial 1990s and 2000s, there's a kind of a sensational viewing of LGBTQ stories. There would be shouting headlines, and that has slowly toned down per se. There's a little more, I would say, more genuine reporting happening. But I would still say there's a bit of a kind of a gaze, which I think we need to be removing. Gaze of a heterosexual person, gaze of a cis male or cis female person, which impacts most of your story. So you need to put yourself in their shoes. You need to put yourself in my shoe, or you should put yourself in the transgender person's shoes and think for how they are thinking about it. What is their worldview? And nowadays it's much more easier to get information. Earlier in the 90s, It's very, very difficult to, if you want to contact a LGBTQ person, it is very complicated. But now, basically, there's so many organizations which are support organizations for LGBTQ people. And also, like, I mean, there's so many online groups. You can easily access LGBTQ persons and they're ready to talk to you. So before you do a story, I would say, not just talk to one LGBTQ person. I would say talk to 4 or 5 LGBTQ people so that you have a diversity of ideas. So sometimes you can just meet a hijra at a traffic signal, and you think you talk to her for 2 minutes, and you think you know all about being a hijra person. That's not true, right? Her story is unique, but there could be different stories, like which could be different. So I would say that before you arrive at any story, talk to at least multiple people about the same story, so that you get a diverse point of view, and basically then combine all of them to make your story. The other thing is, like, I would say, when you're reporting on events, again, like, you need to be more respectful, because you don't know whether that person has been out at their home front or a work front or something. So you cannot just take their names without their consent. You cannot take their photographs without their consent. Even if it's a public place, I would say, if you're focusing on a particular person, I would say take the consent. Consent is really important. I mean, I'm sure like all journalists know that, but I'm just stressing basically about LGBTQ persons, because they may not be out to their family members with the perceived gender or identity which they're projecting there at a safe space. I think I've pretty much covered most of the things which I want to speak about. What I want to leave is, like, with you is a trailer of a film, Evening Shadows, which I have directed and written along with Sagar Gupta, which has won 27 awards, played at 80 film festivals. And also it was on Netflix for 3 years. It's just off Netflix right now, but it'll come back in some other platform per se. I want to for you to watch this particular trailer and think about how would you want to report if you are writing about this film. What is the kind of research you would do? What are the kind of ideas you would take? And what are the kind of reporting you would do about a film like this? Yeah?
कौसल्या सुप्रजा रामपूर्वा सन्ध्या प्रवर्तते उत्तिष्ठ नरशार्दूल कर्तव्यं दैवमान्धिकम् कौसल्या सुप्रजा रामपूर्वा
वसु वो आ रहा है ना, वरना उसके अपने घर की पूजा में मेहमान उससे पहले यहाँ होंगे।
ये सब क्या है? मुझे नहीं करनी कोई शादी वादी।
पूजा के लिए आए हो ना, बस।
नीला तुम्हें पसंद है? यस और नो?
नो।
करेक्ट टाइम पर शादी मतलब करेक्ट टाइम पर बच्चा। बाप जब तक रिटायर होने के लिए तैयार है, बच्चा को जॉब मिल जाता है, वो फैमिली का रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटीज उठाने के लिए तैयार है। इतना सिंपल कैलकुलेशन समझ में नहीं आता है तुम्हें?
अभी तो छोटा है ये।
बस इस बारे में मुझे कोई बात नहीं सुननी है। तो दक्षिणा में देने वाला शॉल का
अंदर होगा।
यहाँ क्यों नहीं है? इस भी मुझे बताना पड़ेगा।
करना भाग्य में जो लिखा होता है ना, उसे कोई बदल नहीं सकता।
हम अपना भाग्य खुद लिखते हैं अम्मा। तुम्हें कुछ बताना है?
तुम्हारा सीक्रेट?
आई एम गे। मुझे लड़कियों में कोई इंटरेस्ट ही नहीं। मैं एक लड़के से प्यार करता हूँ, अमन से।
सुरमई शाम के ये साए
जानती नहीं थी तो जवाब देना आसान था मेरे लिए।
So that was a trailer from the film Evening Shadows. So if you have to report about this particular film, you could consider many aspects of it. Like one is you could be talking about a gay son coming out to his mother, but it also you could be talking about the mother's acceptance of the gay son. But you could also talk about the mother caught within a patriarchal setup where she's unable to accept her gay son. No, and you can talk about traditional families in small towns. How it operates, how LGBTQ identities operate in these small towns. You can talk about so many aspects of this film, but which do you choose is a thing, and how deep is your understanding of that particular subject? Are you going to talk to many gay men to do a story on this film, or are you going to talk to many women, or are you going to talk to many mothers of LGBTQ people? So these are the ideas you need to figure out. So just to point out, like as part of this particular film's outreach, it was very heartening to form a group called Swikar, the Rainbow Parents. So Swikar, the Rainbow Parents, are a group of parents of out LGBTQ children. These parents have made their journey, they've accepted their LGBTQ children, and now they formed a group where they can help other parents come to terms and accept their LGBTQ children. So you can look up on Facebook, Swikar, the Rainbow Parents, and they're an amazing bunch of people. So stories around them would be fantastic to do because they're really accessible. They love to talk, and they basically are from all regions of India. They can speak Bengali, Marathi, Kannada, Gujarati. They're parents of all languages and all classes and caste and religion. So it's a beautiful group. And through them, you can understand what are the challenges of parental acceptance of LGBTQ children, how society looks at LGBT. As I said, like over the last 30 years, things have changed. It's more, I would say, in cities, it's much more acceptable. But still, the parents' challenges are their own. Even if the mother accepts their child, they're not able to tell their immediate relatives. They cannot, sometimes she cannot share it with her own sister. She cannot sometimes share it with her own husband, or other relatives, in-laws. There's so many people impinging. India being such a kind of a very close-knit society, family structure. So it's very difficult for the parents, but they're navigating this and they're spreading happiness. So you can talk to them. And as I said, you can speak to people from the Humsafar Trust. You can speak to people from Kashish Mumbai International Film Festival. So just to kind of wind up this conversation, we started Kashish in 2010, and 2022 will be the 13th edition. Usually we started from a small theater in PVR Cinema. Now, last 7 years, we have been doing it in Liberty Cinema, 1,200 seats. And basically 2 reasons we started Kashish. One is a celebration of LGBTQ people watching their own lives on the big screen, but also for non-LGBTQ people to come and experience good cinema about LGBTQ lives, open their eyes, create awareness. So 30% of our audience are basically from the non-LGBTQ community. So I would say that, like, if you can come to Kashish, which is going to be held June 1st to 5th, June 1st to 5th at Liberty Cinema and online also, you'll be able to see 150 to 160 films from 45 to 50 countries. And you're able to also just imbibe the spirit of Kashish, where people come there without any apprehensions, without any anxieties. They dress the way they want to. They're able to express themselves the way they want to. And it's a very beautiful experience. So I would request all of you to come to Kashish first to 5th, but that's a much later pitch. But basically, I would say be sensitive. A couple of things I just want you people to remember: be sensitive, be informed, I would say interactive. Interact with a lot more people to be informed and become more sensitive. So thank you for listening to me. And if you have any questions, please, you can put on your mic, switch on your mic and ask, or I don't know, Malti is going to facilitate. I'm very happy to answer any question related to my talk.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sridhar. That was really very insightful. Thank you.
Purnima has raised a hand.
Yep. Purnima, Akanksha. So let's first go with Purnima, and then we can go with Akanksha and Swati. And Sunil ji, अगर आपको हिंदी में कोई सवाल पूछने तो आप हिंदी में पूछ सकते हैं.
Hi. My name is Purnima. I am a freelance journalist. So last year I had done a couple of stories on LGBT issues and from rural part of West Bengal. So I had also done earlier stories from the city, and it was like quite different from, when I went to smaller towns and villages. Issues were quite deeper. People were mostly hidden, not out. So how do you see these struggles and issues of LGBT people in, cities comparable to rural areas in terms of education, healthcare, livelihood, access to, government documents such as voter ID or ration card, etc. Because in rural parts, they lack all these facilities completely.
Yeah, that's been a bit of a challenge. I mean, I think in 2008 or something, 2008 to 2010, basically, I think around 450 community-based organizations were set up across India through the NACO project, basically on HIV/AIDS intervention. But these organizations became safe spaces for LGBTQ people to congregate and talk about their issues, not just HIV, but about their identity and other issues also. But right now, I think a lot of these community-based organizations have dissolved because of lack of funding. So one of the things is we need to build more, strengthen these community-based organizations and bring them back. Because I really think that focusing on the cities and focusing on just English language speaking communities would be very detrimental per se. So I would say that, we need to really kind of talk about this in the Anganwadis. We need to talk about it in the primary healthcare centers. We need to sensitize the primary healthcare center. I mean, we don't even have counselors, some of the public hospitals in the smaller towns. We need to definitely, there's a film called Aa Muskura. You can watch it online, Aa Muskura, directed by me, which talked about a counselor in a small town, in a small town like Satara, how she has to battle her dilemmas and also her ignorance about the LGBTQ community. You can see that very clearly. So we definitely need a lot more work. We have come so far, but we need to go further. And I think that can only happen with the other stakeholders basically being part of the movement. We need to bring the doctors in place. We need to bring the counselors into the fold. We need to bring lawyers, and the government officials. So there's a lot more awareness right now about transgender issues because of the government pushing for transgender benefits for transgender persons, healthcare and documentation. But I think the other identities are completely right now not so visible yet. So I would say that if you're talking to a small town parent or a gay man or a transgender person, you need to be, of course, you need to know the dialect per se. That's the one thing. I mean, if you're going to, sometimes the dialect can change from the city to the small town completely. So you need to be, or have somebody from the larger city travel with you. That's what I would say. Suppose you're in West Bengal, you can go to an organization like Sati or Rudrani's organization. Sorry, what's her name? I forgot that some of the organization in Kolkata. You can ask them and ask some of the volunteers to travel with you to some of the small towns. I think sensitivity can be increased that way. They would be more able to kind of bring out the real issues with the village folks or the parents or the children of the village folks. But healthcare and mental health is a huge issue yet. We're not able to reach our resources even now till there. So we need to work on it. So I think we need a lot more support from the allies. I mean, all of you basically to implement these projects across board, across cities and towns and villages for sure.
I have one more question. If can I ask?
Yeah.
So there was an incident when I was working with a newspaper. It happened in Chennai. So there was this boy who, he must be like 21-year-old, and he had moved from his village to Chennai to work. And in this town, in the metro city, he was open and out about his gender and sexuality, and he presented himself as a gay man, but he died of suicide. So what I found is that I actually was a part of that story, and I felt it was extremely wrong to put out his identity because he was not completely out and open to his parents back home. So, but the editor went on, putting out his photographs from social media. So how do you see that? Do you think this is wrong and should not be practiced?
Yeah, it's totally wrong per se. If the identity is hidden, and if you have found already that the identity is hidden from his parents or his society at home, definitely there's absolutely no valid reason to publish his identity or photographs at all. That's really wrong per se. I think as a journalist, I know that like it's very difficult sometimes to fight your editors, and it's a challenge per se. But you have to put your foot down and say that it's my story. You cannot do it without my whole consent. And my consent is that these photographs and his real identity will not go. So if you have to sacrifice the story, I would say sacrifice the story. That's what I would say, instead of, because it's really, I mean, I'll tell you what, the news in the city does reach small towns. I came out as a gay man in Mumbai, and suddenly I found an article in Canada, which reached my hometown. In my mother got a newspaper article saying that like Sridhar Rangayan is a gay man in Canada in a small town newspaper. So news does reach, So you need to be more careful and definitely put your foot down and say you have every right as a journalist that if you don't want your story to be published, you can stop it for sure. You need to put your foot down. That's all I would say.
The argument was that he was publicly posting all his photographs on Instagram.
But no, that's a second identity, right? So yeah, that's a second identity. Yeah, so see, social media and public media are very different, I would say. You need to consider that. Social media could still be, it's within private circles. You can build a social media identity, But when you're putting it in a press, that's really public, really going public. And I don't think it's correct to really reveal his identity in a public platform. Social media, of course, sometimes people have 2 different identities, 3 different identities within social media, or they come out with their real identities also. But they know that like their other family members and other people will not be able to access these social media groups or wherever he's posting. So I really think it's important that you should not be revealing the identity, even though he's public out in the social media circles first. Yeah.
Thank you, Sridhar.
Sure.
Can we have Akanksha asking her question now?
Yeah. So I think my question is extended of like what Purnima said. So mine is like when the first generation learners from queer community or who are sort of don't come from a particular class or caste structure or any kind of community which is marginalized. Okay. So who will look that they are like from mainstream? They look from a mainstream to what is like following in the culture, what is like there. So when I'm studying right now in a university, so when they come into university and spaces and they come into a evolving spaces, a queer spaces, there's a particular class and caste structure or a majority identity which is prevailing. And these marginalized identities or other identities, they just get lost, and there's a certain pressure of belonging. And that is something which I feel like there's no solidarity in that. Like there's like a structure that they have to fall into in order to identify themselves, which I could say as a student right now. So what can be done to it? Like, how can I approach to it?
So one of the things is definitely, I would definitely take that argument for sure, because I really think that like the LGBTQ movement has been largely led by upper class, gay, cis male. I mean, it's been dominated by them earlier, But right now, I think a lot more non-cis identities and have come forth. But I would say that like a lot more focus has to be there for the non-upper caste identities to be emerging for sure. I really think that like we need to have more discussions. I would say panel discussions with participants. Well, I would say let's not invite the same participants over and over again who are out cis male gay men. So I would say invite more participants from the marginalized communities within the LGBTQ spectrum. And I really think that we need to make them. So I think what would help for them is also the media focus, which has been lacking. People wrote about the gay men because they were most visible. Then people started writing about lesbian women because they became more visible. Transgender people, they became more visible. But we need to make, I think the responsibility also is the media to make the other identities visible and other stories visible. And also talking more about, I think there's a lot more to be talked about in terms of the non-upper caste identities like Dalit, Dalit gay men, Dalit lesbian women, Dalit bisexual. And also, like I would say, talk about religion. I think we sometimes presume that like religion does not affect your identity. Religion also affects your identity. But I would say deal with these very sensitively, because these are minefields, These are minefields topics are minefield. Right now in India, the way religion and caste is being discussed is very, I would say, violent and I would say very rhetoric. So we need to break that system and basically be more sensitive when you talk about religion or caste or other identities. So yeah, definitely we need more focus. And I would say even within universities, there's a movement right now to kind of, I would say, bring up or bring out the other identities, but they should themselves do it. I mean, finally, who are the people who are going to be leading the movement, the people who come forward? So the other identities have to come forward and claim the space. It's very difficult, I know. When we started I'm speaking as a cis gay man. When we started, basically, we had to break barriers, fight through prejudices and come out, So similarly, the younger people are doing that right now. The other identities, the LGBTQIA plus identities are coming forward. And also, I would say the marginalized within the marginalized group are coming forward, and they need to claim their space and make their voices heard. And I think you media people can help that for sure. And more films. We need to make more films, more songs about them, more art paintings and sculptures about these identities. I really think we are very, very limited in our cultural outputs about the identities. We really need to make more, as I said, regional language films, regional language poetry, literature made available to everybody here.
The next question, Ritu.
So Swati is going to ask the next question, right?
Yes. Hi, Sridhar. Actually, my question is regarding the thing that you mentioned, that we have a lot of light.
I can't hear you at all, Swati. Sorry.
Hello. Am I audible now?
Little bit, yeah.
Yeah. I'm so sorry. I just talk loudly.
Yeah, better now. Perfect.
So the fact that you mentioned that gay men and trans people and lesbians, they have like more eyes. So I was going to ask you about pronouns as well. So the fact is that now somehow, at least the urban area, they are more comfortable with the pronouns when people say or ask about the pronouns by she, her, or he, him, and even they, them is being accepted. But recently, I also I'm working on a story where I am working with a non-binary person, and they go by the pronouns je, jem, jer. So the fact is that these pronouns are so new, and not new actually. These are very accepted in the mass. And and then the other thing is that they go by je, jem, jer, but they also go by she, they. Also go by she, he. So it's like a lot of, so when I also asked them, like, what pronoun should I use for, in the article, they were like, choose whatever you want to. Now I feel like I should be using JGM because this is something that not a lot of people know about. So it would be a breakthrough, at least people would know that this is something and they should normalize it. But now, like, I'm kind of, fighting because the fact is that, it's not also heard. So what if, like, it gets changed and people don't even understand what's happening? So my question is regarding this, that, when pronouns like je, jem, jer comes in, so what should we do? What should be the right approach?
Yes, I would say that, like, if the person has basically allowed you to use the pronoun which you think would be right for the story, and you think that they, them, there is not going to be understood by a large person per se, and they have already said that, like, they're comfortable by using the pronouns she, her, or they, them. You should use those pronouns rather than using ZZ. Or you can mention as one of the paragraphs saying that, like, they also go by the pronouns ze, them, and basically what that means. You can just explain that in a paragraph. It need not be the main pronoun you're going to use, but you can say that this person also uses his pronouns. So that would be respectful to the person and their identities per se, what the pronouns they're going to use. I think that would be the way to go. I would say that.
Thank you so much.
That's very interesting. And also, I just want to mention, like, one of my friend, she's she and a partner both are lesbian parents of a child. The child is basically non-gendered right now, and so they don't even call them or something. They say the child. It's easy to do that. You don't have to use pronouns at all. So the child. So they use the word the child everywhere. The child does not want to do this. the child wants to do this, child wants to eat now, and that then they want the child to decide their pronoun when they grow up a little more, and they can just, the child can basically decide that, like whether they want to use the he, she, they pronoun or whatever they want to. And that's beautiful parenting. I think very sensitive parenting. I know it's very complicated right now for Indian families to do it, but that would be a fantastic future way of looking and thinking for sure.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Swati.
Can I join in and say something?
Hi, Dolly. How are you?
Sridhar, I am so proud of you. And I'm so proud that you included me right from the start of Kashish. And I've been with you people. And how much I've learned. How much I've learned from the people and the talent that is there. We always make fun of them and we ridicule them. But it's amazing how much talent there is. And I love every single one of them. And it's also, forgive me using the word, but the hijiras that you see on the street who were condemned and ridiculed. But I have a great rapport with them now every time I see them at my car window or a taxi window. And it's amazing how much good just opening your mind and accepting these people has done to everyone. And Sridhar and Sagar, everybody knows that they have my heart and everything. I would do anything for them. Thank you so much, Sridhar. I know it has taken a lot of courage, but between the few people that have started it and done it, it's amazing the work that you've done.
Thank you. Your support has been always there. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, I mean, right now I'm smiling and I'm more in a happy space right now. But it's come from a struggle of 30 years, which has been past. Thankfully, I put that behind. But I think a lot more younger people have to put their struggles behind. We hope that the further generations per se find it more accepting for as a society per se. I hope so. Yeah. But thank you, Dolly, for being there.
Love you, Sridhar.
So I think we have time for just one more questions. The rest of you, if you can just type them out, we'll have them addressed separately if we can. No promises on that. But Srinivas, would you just like to go ahead with your question? And that's going to be the last question. Sorry for the rest of you. If you can just put your questions down, that would be great. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. From Telangana. I am working for Deccan Chronicle newspaper. Sir, my observation is that most of the times parents hide the
there's a problem in your connection. So if you can just type out your question, we'll have it addressed, please. We still have 5 minutes, so I'll just let Arif ask a question if your connection is okay. Arif, please go ahead and ask the question. Srinivas, you can just write your question down.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Arif. Thank you.
Sir, basically, you know that I am Kashmir-based independent journalist. I have been working with local newspaper here in Kashmir Valley. So basically, I want to tell you that my question is that I was going to do a story regarding the transgender community. So basically, when I meet a few transgenders, they have disrespected me. So in some cases, basically, I was thinking if I will go to do a story, they have misbehaved me. A lot of transgender community people have misbehaved me. At that time, I have neglected that story. So basically, as a journalist, I was working. So these transgender community will get a little bit help from a local newspaper. What is their demand? What does they want in the COVID-19 situation? So this kind of the threat that the transgender community are blaming, they are, you know, that they are giving some such kind of bad words, like when you talk to them, they are not using a good kind of language. So basically, if a journalist want to work upon these things, So we need to also need to follow such kind of things which we need to concentrate. So I want to tell you that if we are working like in these stories, so what kind of suggestion you want to give us?
So one of the things is like, I mean, it again, I'm sorry for the bad experience you have had per se, but I would say that like you need to figure out how you approach them, whom you approach, you know. So we need to be, you need to be also sensitive in the way you approach. Suppose they're begging on the street and you suddenly go and tell them that I want to do a story. That may not be the right time for you to approach them because they're busy. That's a profession, right? Begging is a profession. They're busy at workplace at that point of time, you know. You need to basically say that like, okay, here's my card, you know. You can get in touch with me whenever you're free. So you should give them the same respect. Also, like, I mean, as much as you would give other people the respect. Suppose you're doing a story on a police officer, you know, you approach that person with respect, right? Because you need that story. So same way, I would say that you should also approach a transgender person with the same respect, you know, and then I'm sure they would respect you back per se. I don't know why this happened, but I would say that like be respectful to them, approach them when basically they're comfortable being approached, and also go to an organization in Kashmir, which will help you reach out instead of just approaching somebody blindly. I would say go to an organization, talk to them, and they will basically help you with contacts of people who could be more approachable, you know, who could be willing to talk. Maybe that person was not willing to talk, you know. So you just need to be more respectful, and I'm sure you'll get your story for sure. There's a beautiful film called Trans Kashmir, which is being shown at Kashish this year. And it has, I think, around 20 transgender persons speaking to camera. So you should definitely watch it at Kashish Trans Kashmir. And I can basically put you in touch with the people who made the film. And you can talk to the trans person later, maybe.
Sir, just like independent journalists who do not have cards like this, if they are working with the stories like this, so they do not accept you know, if you are working as an independent reporter, then you need to show your identity. Basically, some of the freelance journalists from the Kashmir, if they are doing this too, they do not have any kind of card, they do not have any kind of contract with the organization. Basically, they are pitching the stories direct to the organization, whether they accept or not. That's, you know, the journalism in Kashmir Valley, there is not a lot of good opportunities for here. So the journalists who have completed their degree, who have completed their PhD degrees from this, could not get settled in these platforms, you know, in the media sector. Basically, I'm a journalist.
So one of the things is like, you can show the person whom you're approaching, a transgender person, some of the other stories which you have been able to publish. Of course, you need to, I mean, everybody, if I'm speaking to a journalist, I would like to see the bona fide, I need to see how genuine that person is, what are their bona fides for sure. So if you publish some other stories in other, or not necessarily on transgender issues, but publish stories in other issues, I would say show those stories that like I'm a published author. So I'm bona fide author, you know, I'm a bona fide journalist, you know, that would help them build a trust per se. That's what I would say.
Yeah. Thanks, Sridhar. We won't be taking any more questions, but you can type it out. We'll be happy to forward it to him. Over to Malti. You may. And Sharda.
Thanks, Sridhar, for an interesting session, which addresses issues that is perplexed in so many ways, and yet bringing in a change. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you can forward me the questions which has come up per se by email, and I'll send you the responses whenever I can do that. Yeah.
Sure.
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
I have attended the Srikar programs, and they are very good. So my advice to all the people who are participating in today's talk is that please get your parents and family to accept what Srikar portrays and puts out. And Srikar is doing a very good job. And it really is such a heartening and a pleasure to watch all the people and the parents open up and talk about this.
Thank you, Dolly.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye, everybody. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. So, dear participants, I hope all of you all are taking notes with these great inputs. Moving on to our second session, which addresses various aspects of reporting on the subject. We have with us Dr. Kalpana Apte, who is the CEO of the Family Planning Association of India. Dr. Kalpana Apte has been working for the last 23 years as a development professional in public health, particularly sexual and reproductive health and rights and family planning in India. A passionate advocate of family planning in a right-based perspective, her work enables her to learn from communities and take their voice and needs to the donors and governments, helping the program and policies to become relevant to people's needs. Thanks, Kalpana, for an interesting time today. We are looking forward to you. Over to you, Kalpana.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharda, and thank you, Malti, for inviting me today to speak about reporting on sexual and reproductive health. I would like to begin by greeting everyone on this holy day. It's a colorful festival across India, and I'm glad that I'm a part of this group of people today discussing sexual and reproductive health and how do we report on these sensitive issues. So without further ado, I have about 15 slides or so, and I will share my screen, and I hope it is possible to also, some of you can reach the Mentimeter when I ask you a question. It will make it a little more interactive, and we can have a discussion later. Also, feel free to type questions in the chat box, and I will keep looking at it, and if possible, I'll weave it into the narrative. And I'll just have about 15 minutes or 20 minutes of some points that I would raise, and then we can have a discussion. So starting with, can I share my screen? Yeah, I think so that I can do. Okay. I hope everyone can see my screen.
Yes.
All right, so the topic for today's discussion is reporting on sexual and reproductive health. Let us look at this. This is a huge term. It's a big term. Sexual, reproductive, and health. These are the three important components. And one, you can say, silent word here is rights. That sexual, reproductive health and rights are basically, it's something that goes together, that it's not only health, but the right towards sexual and reproductive health. Now, I would like to start with a little bit of a question to all of you. Please think, when we say the word sex, sexual, or sexuality, these three words, what they evoke in your mind, what kind of feelings come in your mind. Please use this code and go to Mentimeter. Mentimeter, this is the website, menti.com. Use this code and start typing. You'll get three options and you can put anything that comes to your mind. And I'll try and share that screen as well. Okay, I'll try and see if we can get that. So some of you, if you could please start typing. I still don't see any content there. Have you been able to? Yeah, thank you, Ritu. Thank you for putting that in the chat box.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I hope you can see this. We've got three: respect, pleasure, desire. Some more? Let's wait. Of course, I really love the fact that someone has chosen to talk about respect. Also, hi, hello. Yes, of course. When you think of sex, you say hello. Oppressive, yes, absolutely.
Ma'am, could you just repeat? Some people are asking that if you could just repeat what exactly would you want them to do?
All right, I will. Okay, I'll stop sharing this screen and I'll go back to this screen, the previous one. And what I would like to request everyone on this call today is to kindly go to, I'll show you the slide, which will exactly tell you. So please, if you have a phone, mobile phone, which is not engaged, and even if you have, you can go to your browser. Even if you are on this call, it's okay. You can still go to your browser and in your Google or Chrome, type the word www.menti.com. When you go to that site, the site will ask you for the code. Use the code 82907313. As soon as you go there, you will get a link to a slide where you can answer this. What feelings these words evoke in your mind? Sex, sexual, and sexuality. I hope it's clear. It's just about 3-4 more minutes, and I'll show you what you are writing. It's very interesting how we are able to, different feelings come to our mind when we think of the word sex, sexuality, and sexual. All different words, all different meanings. But yes, feel good. Of course, it's so important that when you talk of sex, there has to be immediate another word, that there has to be a consent. And see, the pleasure is still an important part of being sexual or our sexuality. And you go on, it has to be non-judgmental. That sexuality is also related to my identity. Yes, it is an unexplored world. It's a completely a different box. There is eroticism, fantasy, important parts of it. It has to be guilt-free. There is war, and then yes, it is used in war as a weapon. Of course it is, and really good insight into that. Appreciate the one who wrote war. Comfort, it is hidden. Of course it is hidden. It's not really out there in open. We Indians we are not comfortable talking about these issues. But when we talk of sexual and reproductive health, these are two linked things. And all of this, we realize, you as journalists who are reporting, you do realize, and all of this is coming. So I think, yes, shame is another word which someone has written, and I can't agree with you more. Yeah, shame is a huge, big side of being sexual in India. There's a lot of guilt and shame in being sexual. A communication with your partner, the society looks at it. It is also not my personal thing. You have to also have a societal angle to it. Respect, freedom. People are silent about it. Yes. So thank you so much, really. If some of you are still typing, I will let you be for 1 more minute. It is secret. Of course it is. We do it in secrecy, in privacy, in confidentiality. Absolutely. These are very important parts of it. But what really is coming out, that although it's so intimate, there is pleasure, there is desire, there is eroticism, there is romance around sex and sexuality. There is vulnerability. However, there is also repression, there is violence, there are choices where sometimes you get a choice or not, and then there is so much silence, it's hidden, there is hesitation, and there is shame. It's also a taboo word in our most societies. So someone has also very smartly written that yes, you have to be fit and healthy in order to enjoy healthy sexuality. So a lot of feedback. Thank you so much. Let's go back to our presentation and look at now the next slide. So thank you so much for that feedback. It was awesome. You guys are already at a very high level of understanding. So let's look at now, how do you then, such a subject, such an important topic, which is so closely linked with our lives, how do you then write about these, and how do you, what exactly is sexual health? So if you were to define sexual health, you will get the definition that it's a state of physical, mental, and social well-being in relation to sexuality. It requires a positive and respectful approach to sexuality and sexual relationships, as well as the possibility of having pleasurable and safe sexual experiences free of coercions, discrimination, and violence. Now, often when these last line is true for many such instances, and that's where the reportings or the report or the journalist is asked to express it to the world that these violations are happening. And how do you then report? Let's look at the next slide. Moving on to the definitions, when you look at the reproductive health, it's not the same as sexual health. You can't really, so far these days, up to now, reproduce without having sex. Now you can do that. It's possible. Scientific progress has happened so far. There is technology, allows human beings to reproduce without having sex. And we have a host of technologies, and that's a different thing altogether. But looking at it for 95% people, reproduction comes in hand with sexual behavior. And so it's a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being in all matters relating to reproductive system, to its functions and processes. And therefore, now this is important. This is the definition. Now let's look at the implication. That means that if that is your health, then people should have the capability to reproduce and freedom to decide if, when, and how often to have children. So, you know, this whole discussion about how many children one should have, what's the ideal age of having children, what is the spacing, these are the decisions, informed decisions taken by the individuals and the couples. And in this last condition, it's implicit that everyone has the right to be informed and to have access to safe, effective, affordable, and acceptable methods of contraception of their choice, and access to safe abortions. And you will say, why? When everyone can use a contraceptive method, then what's the need for a safe abortion? We'll talk about that. So everyone has a right to access appropriate health care that will enable her to decide whether to continue a pregnancy. And if she does choose to continue, then she should be able to go safely through the pregnancy and childbirth. These slides that I have just shown you are non-negotiable. I mean, we can't have any two interpretations on that. There's only one interpretation, and that's the rights-based interpretation of individuals' right on their bodies. And there is no other interpretation. My body, my rights, everybody's body, and they should be able to have sexual relationships or abstain with their choice, no violation, and have children when they want to, not because someone assaulted a woman, she should not be forced to continue that pregnancy. Or we'll talk about the nuances in such relationships. So now I would again like to request all of you, you are now familiar with that, that mechanism. That's my another second question. And I promise you, this is my last question on Mentimeter. Absolutely the last, no more questions. Why women have unintended pregnancies? Can anybody please go to this www.mentimeter.menti.com and please use the code 82907313. Why women have unintended pregnancies? What do you think? What's your reason? Go to www.menti.com. You can use your phone, mobile phone. Even if you have logged on to this webinar, you can still open your browser, switch off your camera, open your browser, go to www.menti.com, use the code 82907313 and start typing. What do you think women have unintended pregnancy? Why women have? They are so irresponsible. They have unintended pregnancies, right? So why women have? Unintended pregnancies. Any difficulty in this question? Unable to submit a response. Okay. Thank you, Aisha. I don't know. I also don't see anything. Anyways, okay. It may not be working. Sometimes this Mentimeter, you know, is a little difficult thing. I also don't see any responses on the screen. Okay, let me stop sharing. Let us just have, oh, you did submit. Somebody said that they did submit, but I didn't get it here. Is it going in the previous? No, I don't see that. Anyways, let's just chuck the Mentimeter and we still can do this very interestingly. Let's look at our chat. Many people, oh, it says I have already voted. You have submitted your response. Okay, thank you. Okay, forget the Mentimeter, please. Let's put your responses to this question in the chat box, if you may, please. And I will show you the question again. And thank you for your patience. It's not showing, but now you can see the question and just put your question in the chat. Why women have lack of choice? Yes, thank you. Contraception failure, reproductive choices, unsafe sex. Yes, medical complications, career choices, of course, rape, lack of access to contraception. There can be many reasons, but one can be sexual violence in young age. Of course, it is true. Coercion, because she is forced, assault, family pressure. क्योंकि महिलाओं को आज भी निर्णय लेने का अधिकार नहीं मिलता है. सही बात है, बिल्कुल सही. Ignorance, they do not know how to avoid pregnancy. Family pressure, parental pressure, rape, marital rape, lack of sex education, coercion, no trust. Yes, of course. Child marriage, patriarchy, force किया जाता है उसको. Urge to have unprotected, well, okay, that's interesting. Urge to have unprotected sex, domestic violence, men oppose using contraceptive. Absolutely. उनकी मर्जी की सच में कोई value नहीं, ये भी सही है, and they are not aware of their rights. So, yeah, these are very important reasons. All of them are true. Faulty contraception, सही में भी use किया अगर contraception, so they may be, still they may be able to become pregnant. ऐसा भी हो सकता है. And आप लोगों ने जो भी बोला, whatever you said, इसका summary अगर आप यहाँ देख सकते हैं, that one important reason for many women to become pregnant, whether married or unmarried, is contraceptive failure. They are unable to get a contraceptive method, unplanned sex. Many times it may so happen, which may result in an unwanted or unplanned pregnancy. Sometimes unplanned sex may get a pregnancy, but the couple may decide, ठीक है, चलो एक और हमें बच्चा चाहिए था, तो we'll continue. So there is slight difference between unwanted and unplanned. Sexual assault, most of you have written about it. Yes, that's true. And then life changes. There is divorce happening, separation from the partner, professional reasons, personal issues. So a pregnancy might have started with a planned pregnancy. And it suddenly, because of some life changes, death of a spouse, divorce, separation, she may not want to continue it anymore. So a wanted pregnancy, a planned pregnancy can, even after a few weeks, can become unwanted or and the woman may want to take a decision about it. And there are many more such reasons why women seek abortions, why there are unintended pregnancies that women have to face. Now, I'm not going to ask you a question that why only women, because it's her body, because women biologically will end up with a pregnancy, wanted or unwanted, if all these things happen. So biologically, it is she who faces the result of an unprotected intercourse, of a sexual assault, or whatever may happen, the violation of a woman's right to say no to sex can lead her to another violation, and that is an unwanted pregnancy. Now let's see what happens. There is some data, some old data, some 10-year-old data, and the census tells us that today in India, around 20% of population, and this is old data, 2021 census didn't happen. So 20% of our population consists of young people between 19 and 24. That is the prime time where people start initiating sexual behavior, and also reproductive system is very active at that point of time for both men and women. Mathematically, 23 crore people are actually between the age of 19 and 24, and it could be more 10 years later, that is now. This translates mathematically to over 10 crore young women. 10 crore. And the data of abortion seekers from previous studies is typically they are between 20 to 29 years. Most abortion seekers are married women. 2 to 30% abortion seekers are unmarried. And why such a big range? Because until recently, when the abortion law in India, which is known as medical termination of pregnancy, is amended, amendment ke baad, now unmarried women can seek abortion. But before that, when the abortion law, which is MTP, was not amended, only married women could seek safe abortions. And at least 50% of unmarried abortion seekers are adolescents. This is the research from Gigi Boy, Ganatra, and of course, some of it is from census. If you do a literature review and look at the National Family Health Survey, now very latest fact sheet says only 10% of married women have an unmet need for contraception. Married women, okay? This survey does not cover unmarried and sexually active women. 20%, 21% of all pregnancies are unplanned. Women aged 20 to 24 years are married before age 18 are 24%. And current use of family planning among currently married women is 66.7%. So the family planning use is high, that is 66%. Women are still getting married below the age of 18, and 21% pregnancies are unplanned. So you can see this data, and that's very latest data. It's like NFHS 5 is the recent, but one has to remember that current use, that is when you are asking the question, today, are you using a contraceptive? And the woman says yes, does not mean that tomorrow she will remember to take that oral pill, or her husband may be using a condom. Current use is the term which is used for saying, okay, 66% women are using a contraceptive method. On that day when the question was asked, it is not contraceptive continuation. So we cannot say that 66% women are covered. They are not going to have an unwanted pregnancy at all. And a very important study, which is International Institute of Population Studies, Mumbai, and Guttmacher Institute, USA, in 2018 got us some startling facts around abortions in India. In 2015, 15.6 million abortions occurred in India in 2015. So you can imagine that number is huge. It's not reported in the government health management information system. The abortion rate was 47 abortion per 1,000 women aged 15 to 49 years. That means that in 1,000 women, 47 was the abortion rate. And out of this 15.6 million, only 3.4 million abortions, that is 22%, were done in health facilities. Around 73% were medication abortion done outside of health facilities. And about 5% still in this day and age were done using method other than the medication abortion. That means sticks or whatever else. Overall, 81% abortions were medication abortions, 14% abortions were surgical, 5% was done through other methods that were probably unsafe. And the study estimated that 48.1 million pregnancy, there was a rate of 144 pregnancies per 1,000 women aged 15 to 49 and a rate of 70 unintended pregnancies per 1,000 women aged 15 to 19. That's very high. Abortion accounted for 1/3 of all pregnancies and nearly half of pregnancies were unintended. So this is our data. Now we have to remember that safe abortions are legal in India. Vulnerable and marginalized poor women still lack access. And you can see my previous slide, which talks about it. That although half of the pregnancies were unintended, only 1/3 women were able to seek and access abortion. The rest were continued. There is although the abortions are legal through the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act, this act conflicts with existing acts like prevention of sexual offenses against children, protection of children on sexual offenses, and PCPNDT, that is preconception, prenatal determination technology, that is PCPNDT. You all know that very well. Ground realities and entitlements of the women on abortion issues do not match. You'll question me, what does that mean? It means that really women are entitled under certain conditions to access abortion. But on the ground, that is not so sure. And why? I'll tell you one simple thing. In India, before the law got amended recently in October, before that, women had the right to seek abortion up to 20 weeks of their pregnancy on 5 grounds. But even today, women have been seeking legal approvals, going to the court, putting a case, asking the judgment, can I seek an abortion? Can my doctors have been asking for legal approvals, a judgment copy, and women have been, and lawyers have also been taking that case, and judges have been giving the opinion whether or not she can seek an access abortion, asking medical boards, creating medical boards. So what is already approved for up to 20 weeks should not go to the court, right? But that was still going to the court. It still continues to go to the court. So then the entitlement of women up to 20 weeks under certain conditions is still not reaching them. They still have to go to the court and get the court approvals. So this is my absolutely last slide. And then we can have a discussion, because I think there's a lot of discussion that can happen on this instead of a one-sided speech. Sexual and reproductive health and rights go hand in hand. Health cannot be ensured without the entitlement to rights. SRHR, as we like to call it, abbreviation, these are basic human rights. These are very sensitive subjects. You all have also said just now, you have responded to that question. These are taboo subjects. These are topics, words, very powerful words, which you have to write and report on. And the communities are not very comfortable. These topics are already very sensational. These are often stigmatized. There is popular way of dealing with the topic is to victim blame. If a woman is going for abortion, then it is said women are irresponsible because they are not using a method of contraception. Why she cannot use a method? So there is often the language that we use, the slant of the article or the slant of reports that we often see is actually somewhere blaming the person who is already violated. There is often a very superficial understanding of the complex issue. It's not easy to understand these things. And so a net search and a little bit of understanding and the articles then show that there is a lot that can be done and written sensitively. And often views or framing of the views is not based on the rights perspective, but is more on prevalent thinking, 2 + 2 = 4, and not the complexity of the situation. And so concluding, I would say as someone who has worked in this field, and the voice of the press and the media and the journalist is one of the most influential voice. You can really make or break something. And this power in your hands, we often hope will turn women's right into a very, very tangible thing to bring the changes in her life. So we would hope that the reporting on sexual and reproductive health and rights would be gender sensitive. It will always have a base, which is rights of the individual. It has to be factual, absolute the facts. There should be some analysis which may be more expansive than the other things, just not a two-dimensional writing which just says what it is. It has to be somewhere the whole article, even if you are reporting something very stark, something very violated, some women are being burnt as witches, or there have been women died because of a sterilization camp, or whatever the subject which is so painful, difficult, violation you are reporting, even in that, the view has to be how it enables. What is the voice that is coming out which will lead to a change? How does it enable so that this doesn't get reported tomorrow? And it always has to be respectful. Even if it's a difficult topic, even if we think that there are only shades of black and white in this, it has to be respectful. So this is what we look forward to reading in an article. I really feel that there is a lot that we can discuss today, but this is a big topic. And we can't really have a huge conversation on this, but I'm really happy to talk to you on this issue. So I will stop sharing and we can have a conversation.
So thank you very much, ma'am, for this wonderful presentation. We've already got one question coming in. Dr. Kalpana is sitting in a library and she's requested if I can ask the question on her behalf, which is, I'll just read it out so I don't miss out the essence. Can you tell a little bit more about the conflicts between POCSO and safe abortion?
Okay. So thank you, Renuka, for that question. It's a very important question that, again, I was talking to you about complexity. The POCSO Act is a very important act which protects children from sexual offenses. However, in that protective mode, somewhere we have forgotten the agency of young people who are sexually active. There are a lot of sexual behavior that is consensual amongst young people who are below 18, such as that consent may be. And POCSO Act actually outlines, or rather it includes that if anyone comes to know, whether it's a teacher or a doctor or a counselor or a neighbor or whoever or a friend who knows, who's in the knowledge of sexual behavior of a person below 18, they must mandatorily report it to the police. If you don't do that, then it's a punishable, non-bailable offense. Now, this is fine. I mean, there is a deniability for almost everybody else because it's a verbal knowledge, or there is a deniability. All I will say, I don't understand legalese very much, but I know that it is not. But for a healthcare provider, for a teacher, and that's a different discussion of educational institute, let me stick to the MTP Act. So when a girl who is below 18, maybe married even, comes to our clinics, we have to mandatorily report it to the police or juvenile justice boards. If we don't do that, we are at a risk of being arrested. Our doctors and we are at the risk of, and the police has come to our clinics a few times. That's also happened. Now, my experience is coming from our work, which is happening. 80% of the people who we provide services are poor and marginalized. Last year alone, we did more than 30,000 safe abortions across the country within the legal framework. So from there are also minor girls coming in. There are also people, young girls who have been sexually molested. They have been assaulted. And they and their parents or their guardians are absolutely not in a position or in willingness to report a case to the police because of the mindset. As a healthcare facility, we are duty bound and mandated to report that to police. If you do that, these girls will run away from the waiting room itself. God knows where else they will go. God knows what will happen to them. And our field staff says, nahi to dena hi hai, service to dena hi hai, we have to give. Because these girls may not even live if they go back. They may have to commit suicide, or they may even be killed. We don't know. Or they may go to a backstreet abortionist, or God knows what may happen to them. So MTP Act says that we have to keep confidentiality. And if you betray the confidentiality, then there is a very serious punishable offense. But at the same time, it also allows you to report. It allows you to report that whichever law is prevalent at that time, you have to follow that law. So POXO Act says in it that this law takes precedent over all other existing laws. So in that sense, there is a conflict. I don't think healthcare facilities should be mandated for police reporting. I think the agency of young people should be recognized. I think consensual sex between young people, both going to juvenile justice homes and both, it can be very traumatic and life altering. So there is a need for discussion without diluting the protection of POXO, which is very important for India. It's very important, and we do realize that sometimes guardians themselves can be the violators. And the act actually is framed to protect such young people whose guardians are violating them. They could be parents, they could be hostel keepers or superintendents, or whoever else the young person is being looked after by. So yes, intentions are very good and important, but at the ground, it has resulted in these kind of realities, and that's the conflict, Renuka. I hope it clarifies. There's a white paper that we have written, not a white paper is too big a word, but a situation analysis that I'll be happy to share with you.
Thank you, ma'am. Right. Can we have Snehal unmute herself and ask the question? And then there is a question by Soumya in the chat, and then we'll come to Swati. And I think that's all the questions we'll be able to take now. You're unable to mute, Snehal. Pooja, can you help her in unmuting, please?
Yes, it's done. Hello? Hello? Am I audible?
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Hello, ma'am. Snehal, myself, Snehal. So my question is that I have come across many women, like especially unmarried women, like they have got pregnant, and they some of them went through the aborting process, and some did not. So who did not, they choose because it made them feel guilty about it, that they are aborting or basically killing a living being. That one thing. And who actually did abortion, they went to guilt and then got into a mental trauma. So like my question is, how can we reduce these things, and how we can counsel them in a way?
Okay. Thank you for this question. It's a very important question because safe abortions in India do not come packaged with the comprehensive abortion care package. But the good practice is it's known as comprehensive abortion care. When you talk of comprehensive abortion care, it's not only providing that medication or that procedure to the woman and the adolescent girl, but there is a pre-abortion counseling is a part of it. And you are right that there is women and girls who come to these centers, meet their gynecologist or a provider, often have mixed feelings in their mind. And while they are very worried about the life onwards, if they continue this pregnancy, which is not timed well, they were not ready for it, they did not plan well, they also have a lot of questions in their mind. And scientific facts are the best way to move forward about it. There are questions about when does so why the Indian law has allowed it till 20 weeks. If you go from the scientific facts and you explain it to the person, then the guilt about killing or all those things are, because this is not scientific. There is It's that the whole debate about abortions is this crux is that there is some people who feel that it's a killing a life. But you see, if you see life, what is the definition of life? And I'm not going to get into that discussion here. But remember one thing, that, all human beings are born free and equal. So they have to be born in order to become human beings. Remember that. And then the second thing we have to remember very well, that in almost all religions, up to a certain gestation period, abortions are absolutely acceptable. So that is the second kind of a thing, which is a scientific explanation also. So we can have, but yeah, counseling, and on the internet, there are some very respectable sites which can provide you with these kind of information that no, it's not killing a human being, it's not killing a life. It is the life of the woman who is carrying an unwanted pregnancy is the most important and primary life. And then the other things will come afterwards. She has to live in order to do anything else. Her life is precious. And who has to value that life? We have to value that life, isn't it?
Thank you, ma'am. I'll quickly, ask a short question on behalf of Soumya, and this also goes for Purnima. So a lot of young girls are getting married early on, and they have pregnancies which can vary from age 15 and to 18 and upwards, and there are a lot of issues around it and complexities and complications. So how do we make them more aware? What kind of programs can we do? I mean, how can they make them more aware is their question. What can be done around it?
Yes. So yes, this is a really very sad situation in India, that there are big percentages of girls who are getting married below 18 also. And it's not only marriage. Once a girl gets married, there is immense societal pressure on the couple to prove their fertility. And so there's immense pressure on them to image the first pregnancy and child. So therefore, how can now, there are many ways. And now more and more it is becoming important to have very good, strong content which is out there on the internet, because internet is becoming accessible by everybody, and not only in English but very respectable content in language. There is a dearth of good material in Indian language around these issues, which analyze from every angle and which use the good source of material and puts it out there. So certainly putting good content out there, I would say, is the first priority, that in all languages there has to be a repository of these issues which can be accessed in a simple language. I mean, I tend to use, coming from a technical background, maybe I will use very complex words, but this has to be in simple language, and there has to be mechanisms which we do, say a hotline where a girl can call and ask these questions, maybe a website where they can put in some questions and we can answer those questions. And we do all of this. And we do continue, but India is a huge country, and whatever you do is still less than what still can be done. So that is what I would say, a few things that can come to my mind.
Thank you, ma'am. We have a last question now from Swati. So Swati, please unmute and go ahead and ask a question.
Yes, hi ma'am. My question is regarding the fact that because even when you mentioned in your presentation that a large number of people who are opting for abortion are unmarried women, right? So the fact is there is also the thing that the MTP kits that is available for women to terminate the pregnancy for 10 weeks. And it's illegal to buy it like off counter. You have to go to a doctor or somebody like with a prescription. Then there's this news that recently came about US where they're actually delivering MTP kits via mail. So that my question is that of course that MTP might be, because it's regarding you might need a few tests. I think, I'm not sure, but it's not that accessible, number one, and it's not that healthy, going without a doctor's prescription. So how does this fall into the play? And then this second, like a question that would connect to this is that the attitude of gynecologists in India is not very healthy, and they tend to, kind of reprimand you for being sexually active. So because then they genuinely opt for MTPs illegally because of this reason as well. So like, what could be a right way to approach this situation, because it's such a dicey situation where you have to take care of the woman as well as the law in hand.
So a couple of things, Swati, all good questions. One important thing we must remember that the medication abortion is really transformation of medical technology. It's a very, very simple medication. Really speaking, as per WHO guidance, and we also see in our practice, hardly any tests are required before if the pregnancy is really early. It says the gestation is below 9 weeks even, then it's one of the safest one. I mean, certainly it's safer than sticks and those kind of very crude ways of abortion. And if a woman has decided that she doesn't want to continue her pregnancy, nothing really, I mean, she will go to any length to see that she takes that decision. Now, coming to unmarried women and being sexually active, I started my presentation with sex and sexuality. There's so much stigma and so much taboo. And yes, somewhere it's also very patriarchal, because sexually active girl and woman, they are sluts. But if a man is sexually active at whatever age, he is not, vilified, or he is not, and that's patriarchy for you. Really speaking, that is one of the starkest differences. And it's also sad that unprotected intercourse will land her into trouble more than it would land him. So certainly that is number one thing. Now coming to the law, now the law in 2021 was amended, the MPP Act, and there is no difference. Now it is the woman and her partner. Earlier, the language was the married woman and her partner. Now it's the woman and her partner. Married word is struck off. One of the victory, we fought so much for that, striking off the word married. We also fought for many things, but that they didn't come. But this one good thing, and I really 3 cheers for Indian lawmakers for removing the word married from the MPP Act. So it's completely legal now. Any woman doesn't have to tell her marital status and can walk in, and if it is failure of contraception due to rape or sexual molestation and assault, or if the pregnancy continuation is going to harm her, or if it is an abnormal or not compatible with life fetus, those are the conditions under which any woman, regardless of her marital status, can access abortions. So that is certainly now India has moved beyond, and it is now coming closer to a better law. So that is what it is. And what was your other question? I missed out on that. Sorry.
So my other question was, I think you kind of answered it, but the question was that the US and in some states in US, they're kind of moving towards where they're getting MPP kits via mail. So and the ironical
understood.
And the ironic is that the prescription, they are getting it from an online media, and then they're sending it to some places in India. So the pills are being sent from India to US with an additional charge. But the mail thing is happening. So I was asking, how safe is that? And do you think that happening anytime soon in India, or like would that be welcomed in India?
Illegal. It's illegal. It's completely illegal in India to give a safe abortion medication without a prescription and without certain conditions. So if it is available online, it's illegal. If it is sent in mail, it is illegal. It's not strictly legal, really, and it can be penal. If there are penal action can be taken against the person who's selling and the person who's accessing. Now, why it is happening in US, wherever there are oppressive policies where women cannot access, it transforms into 2 ways, that women will access abortion. So before the Ireland got its law, women were going to UK and accessing abortions. You will see a lot of women coming to India in Chennai and other southern states from the countries which are south to us, and accessing abortion, staying for a few days and going back. There's a lot of travel happens when women are not able to access abortions in their own country, and if they can afford it, then they will certainly go to the places where they can access this abortion safely. That is for sure. We also in North also we get in our clinics also we get some women coming in from other countries and coming and accessing and going back in a couple of days. So certainly women will access, and there are not only male, there are a lot of ways that women are able to access because see, mail is anonymous in the sense nobody knows what is coming in her package. So it's that way safe. And if the woman has already in US also, women have a kind of, if she is pregnant and she goes to her healthcare provider, she is completely screened whether the pregnancy is within the uterus, whether her hemoglobin is normal, if there is any RH issues. And then if all these things are fine, then the provider can easily send. And this can all happen on the internet. You see, you can send your reports. There is no need for physical exam at all for early pregnancy. So if all of this is there, then easily the medication can be sent. It's as simple as that. So this is happening.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Swati ma'am. Just one question, even though I'd said no more, but I think it's important, where Sunil is asking, अनचाहे गर्भ का आंकड़ा कहाँ से जुटा सकते हैं?
अनचाहे गर्भ का आंकड़ा आपको 2-3 रिपोर्ट में मिल जाएगा. आप NFHS में देखिए, अभी NFHS का डेटा आने लगा है, रिसर्च पेपर्स हैं, लैंसेट में स्टडीज हैं, तो आप थोड़ा नेट सर्च करेंगे, बहुत आपको अच्छे आर्टिकल्स इंडिया में बहुत रिसर्च पेपर्स हैं, उसमें मिलेगा.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. There is one more question which I'm not going to ask, but if it's okay with you, we'll forward it to you, और आप उसका जवाब दे दीजिएगा.
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल, I'll be happy. My email address is kalpana@fpaindia.org. You can please feel free to write. I'll just type it in the chat box.
Sure. Thank you, ma'am. Over to you, Malti.
Yeah. Thanks, Kalpana. Such an interesting session. It gives us so much of an insight into this complex subject that you spoke about. Thank you so much, Kalpana.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. Please feel free to send your queries and I will try my best to answer it.
Sure.
Thank you for inviting me here, and again, a happy Holi to all of you.
Same to you, Dr. Kalpana. Thank you. So, dear participants, our last and third session is on inclusive reporting and is being conducted by Lakshmi Sreenivasan, who will elaborate on what is inclusivity and how does one look at it through a gender lens, as well as what should one be aware of while reporting on the matter. Lakshmi Sreenivasan is an ICF trained coach, learning and organizational development specialist, and a practicing psychologist. She's a design thinking specialist from MIT Sloan. She blends her deep understanding of neuroscience, psychology, and design thinking. While designing interventions and programs for organization, she has successfully completed suicide gatekeeper training and has volunteered with a suicide prevention cell in the past. Lakshmi, it's really an honor to have you here with us. Over to you, Lakshmi.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Malde. And the previous speaker was brilliant, and I was almost encouraged to ask few questions, but I realized that maybe you're overshooting the time. So I've almost forgotten what is it that I'm going to talk about, but I'll try my best to speak on inclusive reporting. So thank you so much for inviting me here. Is somebody going to help me to start the
Yes.
presentation? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So before we begin, a few things that I want to share. I can speak Hindi and I can speak English both. So if there are participants who would like to question or ask questions or speak in Hindi, feel free to do that. I'll be happy to respond. Also, keep using the chat box. The chat box will, if there's any specific question while I'm talking something, you can post the questions there, and I will take it. Also, I intend to keep about 15-20 minutes at post my presentation, just in case if you have any questions. Yeah. So let's start. So my first question to all of you is, When we talk about diversity and when we talk about inclusion or what inclusive reporting, when we talk about this, what does it mean to you? आपको क्या समझ आता है जब हम बोलते हैं diversity or inclusion? What comes to your mind? What's your understanding? Anyone? So irrespective of demographic, multiplicity of voices, yes, true. It means gender, right? Okay. Yes, I mean, all of this is true. When we speak about topic, we include people belonging to every gender intersection, right? When we talk about inclusive reporting, what is primary to inclusiveness? Whether it is reporting, whether it is inclusive across various industry, it's about how do we include voices? How do we include representation? How do we include ideas, thoughts, and people from the margins? In fact, our tagline as an organization, the Outcast, is known as drawing the margins to the center. How do we bring people who are on the margins, जो हाशिए पे खड़े लोग हैं, उनकी आवाज, उनके representation, उन लोगों को आप center में कैसे लेके आए? Because it is just not about talking about gender, include demographics or different kinds of or tribal or caste, all of this intersections. But it is about changing the lens. आप किसी subject को or any subject that you are reporting, with what lens are you looking at that subject or that topic? Okay, so for instance, if I ask you to imagine something, imagine if you're standing, all of us, close to about 70 odd people are standing in a circle, right? And when you look at each other, what is your vantage point? What is your point of view? Who are you looking? Are you looking from outside in, or are you looking from inside out? Okay, अगर आप visualize कर पाएं कि आप अगर सर्कल में खड़े हैं और अगर आप एक दूसरे को देख रहे हैं, so where are you looking at each other from? What vantage point? Because that will define your reporting, that will define your ideas, your thoughts, and how you are going to present the very language you are going to use for inclusive reporting. So with this context, I'm going to take you forward and can we move to the next slide? Yeah. So I'm going to take you forward and help you understand that the diversity and inclusion in reporting, what we also mean with the context that bringing in voices, diverse voices. It could mean gender, it could mean sexuality, it could mean demographics, it could mean the intersections of social, economical, political, and when we talk about Indian context, it also means your caste, it also means your religion, it also means the other intersections that we are standing upon. So as somebody who is aspiring to become a journalist or a reporter, can I include diversity in everything that I do? Is what the context of this particular presentation is. So let me ask you this question. If I ask you to imagine, just think about it, a fighter pilot. अगर मैं आपको कहती हूँ कि एक फाइटर पायलट को इमेजिन करिए, तो आपके दिमाग में क्या विजुअल आता है, क्या पिक्चर आता है, क्या इमेज आता है when you think about a fighter pilot? What's the image you get? A man with his uniform, yes, a man, okay, a man pilot, a man in uniform with white color. Okay, great, interesting, right? So if you look at it, man, gender, uniform, okay, which means a social status, white color, which means racism, right? A smart person, which means again intelligence. You are looking at a fighter pilot, intelligent hota hai, okay? लड़ाई के लिए हमेशा तैयार होना, okay, sure. A trained man stroke woman or a young man. Look at this. Just one single title of a fighter pilot or a profession, not title but a profession. All of us created this image of a man. ये कहाँ से आ रहा है? Why do you only have a man who is dressed in a uniform a young man for that matter, and I'm also considering that he's an intelligent, fit, physically fit person who's coming into your mind. What is this? Why is it that so? Why is it not a woman? Why is it not a transgender person? Why is it not a non-binary gendered person? Why is it always it is a man who's physically fit, who is smart, who is trained and is young? और इसी को हम बोलते हैं, yes, ये हमारी पुरुषवादी सोच का नतीजा है. Exactly that. One is patriarchy, of course. I'm sure since yesterday to today, आप लोगों ने बहुत सारा चीजें, मतलब patriarchy पे इतनी बात की होगी, पितृसत्ता पे बात की होगी. But I think ये हमारे लिए भी important है कि I'm going to take it as most women or the second and third gender and the non-binary gender who are in this group, because I don't know the gender of the group here. But why is it that for all of us, despite being a particular gender, not male, हमारे दिमाग में भी यही सोच है, because this is what internalized patriarchy looks like, right? ये भी हमारे दिमाग, we have internalized all of these ideas. This is called as unconscious bias. That I have a bias that every time I think about a fighter pilot, it is a man. Or every time I think about a surgeon is always a man. But if I think about a gynecologist, if I ask you to think about a gynecologist, the first image in your mind is always about a woman. ऐसा क्यों है कि गायनेकोलॉजिस्ट हमेशा औरत होती है? क्या आपको लगता है कि मेल या नॉन बाइनरी जेंडर्स एक गायनेकोलॉजिस्ट नहीं बन सकते, उनमें कैपेबिलिटी नहीं है, या वो चूज नहीं करते हैं? I mean, we can have a larger discussion on that, but the point being that look at our unconscious bias. Now, my submission to all of you is that when you are going to report, you also are going to report or create articles or do journalism with these biases. And hence, it's extremely critical that we question and be aware about our own, biases for that matter. It could include gender, it could include multiple other biases for that matter. और ये जो bias की हम बात कर रहे हैं, ये bias अभी नहीं आया आपको. So अगर आप अपने मतलब early education अगर देखेंगे, since childhood we've been trained like that. Like even in our school books, the books had pictures of fighter pilot was a male versus a housemaker or a housewife was always a woman. It was never any other gender. And that is what bias is all about, right? That it's built over it. Okay. So with this, I want you to take to the next slide and talk about stereotypes. I'm sure सभी लोगों ने ये stereotypes सुना है. अभी जो हम बात कर रहे हैं वो भी एक तरीके का वही है. But आपके लिए stereotypes क्या हैं? What do you really understand by stereotypes? इसका हिंदी अनुवाद मुझे नहीं पता, but stereotypes का मतलब आपके हिसाब से क्या है? What are stereotypes for you? And it is interesting, जब हम journalism या media की बात करते हैं, gender-based role, yes, Purnima, traditions, society pressure, something that is perceived to be norm, long hair, okay. Stereotypes, personal preferences होते हैं. हर एक का personal preference होता है. What we like, what we don't like. For example, I'm going to connect that to heteronormativity and heterosexuality, but I'm going to let's take a quick dive into stereotype, right? It's a personal preference. मुझे क्या अच्छा लगता है? या और जब stereotypes एक बड़े बहुत ही it's not a harmful thought, but एक दिमाग में एक thought होता है. But जब उस stereotype को consistently believe करके consistently उस पर act करते हैं, when we act on a stereotypes, it becomes prejudice over a period of time. So for example, women are weaker sex. ये बड़ा common stereotype है जो हमेशा सुनने को मिलेगा कि women are weaker sex. In fact, for that matter, the third gender, who has decided the sequence or the chronology that the first gender is male, the second gender, which is the weaker gender, is women, or the third gender is the third gender, or the transgender people or the persons for that matter. Who has decided this particular stereotype? And the idea simply being that जब ये stereotype जो पर्सनल प्रेफरेंसेस हैं जब हम अपने दिमाग में इंटरनलाइज करते हैं, आप उसी स्टीरियोटाइप्स को यूज करके यू आर गोइंग टू क्रिएट डिस्क्रिमिनेशन, ऑपरेशन एंड ऑफ कोर्स सिस्टमिक ऑपरेशन एंड सिस्टमिक डिस्क्रिमिनेशन फॉर दैट मैटर. सो फॉर इंस्टेंस, हैव यू एवर सीन a transgender person as a reporter or as an anchor or anybody in the media for that matter? And why do you think it's not the case? Why do you think that कि मीडिया में या फिर या न्यूज एंकरिंग में या रिपोर्टिंग में आपको कोई एक नाम चीन ट्रांसजेंडर पर्सन का नाम नहीं मिलेगा? प्रेजेंटेबल, व्हाट डू यू मीन बाय प्रेजेंटेबल? आर यू सेइंग दैट दैट एक न्यूज एंकर को, एक न्यूज रिपोर्टर को एक तरीके से अपने आप को प्रेजेंट करना होता है? बट द आंसर इज रॉन्ग. दैट्स आल्सो कमिंग फ्रॉम द बायस, राइट? दैट वी आर यूज्ड टू लुकिंग एट एंकर्स ड्रेस्ड अप इन कोट एंड सूट, or women again dressed up in power dressing in a certain way, and then they are anchors. And anybody who does not fit that stereotype of an anchor or a journalist or a reporter, we think that they are not suited for that particular profession. And that's exactly what the stereotypes that we must break, right? So I'm not sure if you have heard, or जो रूरल जगह से आते होंगे उनको शायद ये पता होगा, खबर लहरिया. Have you heard of खबर लहरिया? Yes, I'm sure most of you, right? Look at how Khabar Lahariya has broken the very stereotype of how media and reporting and journalism has been done, right? People, women, especially women coming from the grassroots, coming from the marginalized or disadvantaged communities, without access to smartphones, without access to television networks, have still been able to break and bring news which are from the grassroots. And that is what we want you to understand, that stereotypes जो होता है बड़ा unharmful होता है. But when we are going to, जैसे वो होता है ना, if you are wearing the चश्मा which is already colored, अगर आप लाल रंग के चश्मे से न्यूज को टॉपिक्स को सब्जेक्ट्स को देख रहे हैं, तो आप उसी तरीके का उसको प्रेजेंट करेंगे. So and that's what I mean, that as an individual who wants to bring true stories or be the voice of the marginalized and the disadvantaged communities, must be aware about what stereotypes are they themselves carrying, right? So I'm going to take you forward and talk about one of the common biases that we've seen here, right, in media and journalism, the bias of omission. So before I take you to the other points on the slide, I'm going to my question was, what is bias of omission? They say, I mean, it's very self-explanatory, right? That when you do not have representation, or when you don't have people to talk about their own issues or talk about their own life stress, whether women, whether the people from the LGBTQI community, or people with disability, or people with neurodivergence as a mental state or a mental condition for that matter. जब अपने इशू को बात करने के लिए जब हम वहाँ प्रेजेंट नहीं होते हैं, what happens to that? So imagine this. Men talking about subjects related to women. I remember, very recently we did a program on unconscious bias, and I showed them a picture जहाँ पे close to about 50 लोग थे. They were talking about a health. It was a conference, health summit conference, and all of them were male. So are we saying that healthcare is only related to male, or men are only capable of talking about health? So when we're talking about bias of omission, what we are saying is, when the media outlet chooses not to write certain stories, or they leave out relevant information or perspectives on purpose, that is the bias of omission. And what it does is, it unfortunately creates biased narratives. Unfortunately, it creates biased discourses, and hence the whole discrimination, the cycle of discrimination, oppression perpetuates for that matter, right? So let me ask you this question. When do you reach out to LGBTQ community or for LGBTQI community or women or any disadvantaged community like caste or religious minorities for that matter. Aap inke paas, many of the journalists call and ask that would you be able to talk about this particular subject, or would you be able to talk about LGBT community, or would you be able to talk about the 377 judgment. So when do you reach out to these particular groups? Aap kab reach karte hain? And in most case, you will find that reporters reach out to this specific community when the subject is related to them. Okay, so what I mean by that is media stereotypes shape societal attitudes, behavior, and expectations. We all really know about that. So for instance, the journalists, reporters, or mainstream reporters only reach out to women when the subject is related to women or neurodivergent or LGBTQI community or people with disability or mental health. So for example, people reach out to me and ask about expert opinions on mental health. If there is a mental health bill coming up, or the budget which is allocated for mental health, they will reach out to me. Or when there is caste issue, because I come from a specific Bahujan community, people will reach out to me and ask for caste. But the question is, why do you only reach out to people when the subject is related to that? Are you saying that a woman cannot talk exactly tokenist representation? Are you saying that a person from the LGBTQI community or a transgender person cannot talk about issues related to science or technology or finance? Or can a person with disability cannot talk about women issues, or the political, social, economical, whatever issues that are happening? So the idea is, whichever subject that you are reporting, can you bring diverse people into the room? It's got nothing to do with their specific location, womenhood, neurodivergence, LGBT caste. So if you're talking about STEM, which is science, technology, engineering and math, in that STEM, have you seen on media channels or any articles which are written by media? You will find that only men are talking about it. You do not have any bites or any opinions which come from the women. Halanki, you will know that data says that 29% of scientific workforce, 29% of women are in the STEM profession. Despite of that, people do not reach out to them when it comes to talking about any other subject, but we'll talk about, for example, maternity leave hai, to go to women. So are you saying that people with disability or LGBTQI community do not have opinion on maternity leave? It's not true, right? So how do we bring more diversity into the room is what I mean by bias of opinion, of omission. Yeah. So taking you forward, gender sensitive reporting is something that I wanted to talk about. That when we talk about inclusive reporting, there are 4 key elements that, which is important, which is selection of sources, eliminating gender stereotypes, gender sensitive language, and coverage of gender equality issues. I'm going to give you an example for each one of them. Okay. So when we're talking about selection of stories, okay, so for journalists, producers selecting media stories, it's extremely crucial to strive a balance, the presence, equal presence of women, men, and non-binary genders to be there on the platform to be able to have a holistic conversation. But that's not how it happens, right? It also allows media to accurately reflect what's happening in the society. Inclusion of women, transgender, or non-binary who are experts in that field, when you bring them onto the center table is when you can have fruitful conversation which represents the entire society. It cannot be only men's voices talking about politics, economics, conflict, science, and sport. Let me share it's hilarious, but the political discussions that were happening in the last month or so about, of course, the 5 states which were going in elections, women were not involved, not included in the political discourse at all. In fact, 2 major states, the Goa and the Uttar Pradesh, both states have a higher number of women voters, but all this mainstream media channel did not talk about how women, or even if they were talking about, it was very minuscule, 1 or 2 channels which were, just Women's Day tha, to Women's Day ke din auraton ko bula liye aur baithak banwa li. No, it's not about that. Women's Day, of course, you celebrate because there is oppression, discrimination, and we need one specific day. But what about the other days? How do you not include women in all of these important decisions which the country is making? 68% of women go for women, vote both in Goa and in Uttar Pradesh. But women were not asked that why are you voting? What are your important things or your needs that the government is not doing or doing whatever that is. So they were not asking for opinions. So when we select sources or stories, look for diverse voices and an equal representation, irrespective of आप article लिख रहे हैं, आप पूछ रहे हैं, or you are holding a webinar, or any kind of discourse where you have people around. So that's about sources and stories. Also, elimination of gender bias, for that matter. And what I mean by elimination of gender bias is including overall making sure that it's not only one specific gender which get highest representation, but also making sure that your stereotypes. For instance, if you look at, I think there was one research, I'm forgetting the research, but I'll share it with you in the chat for that matter. One of the research talked about that in the last couple of years or so, only during Me Too or any of the sexual-based violence when happened, that is when women's issues, only 8% of the times were covered in the mainstream media. Rest of the time, women did not represent, or even LGBTQI community for that matter, which is also minuscule, which is also lower than the 8%. None of these groups, for that matter, were shown in terms of representation in the media. When I say representation, I don't mean by presenting the news, but also talking about these subjects. So it's important that we break that gender stereotype, for that matter, that who's writing the story and whose stories are we telling, for that matter. Yeah. And the third point being using gender sensitive language. And this is something very close to my heart. And I find it very, very difficult. Every time I read articles, whether it's on Twitter or people, all the bigger news anchors or reporters on Twitter, the kind of language that we use. Okay. So I'm going to move to the next slide just to give you a few examples here. If you just read this statements, if a student studies hard, he will succeed. Every nurse should take care of her own uniform and cover the expense herself. If men represent the whole human race, do you see anything wrong in these statements? Yes, professions are associated with gender. Gender stereotype, okay. First, it's he. Certain roles are assigned to certain gender, yes. Yes. So for example, it reminds me, this particular language matters, reminds me of this famous quote by Nelson Mandela. No offense to Nelson Mandela. I mean, he's been one of the inspiration role model to many people who come from the marginalized or disadvantaged community. One of his quotes says, if you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. But if you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. I mean, what a beautiful quote, right? It's extremely inspiring that you speak to a person's heart, but you don't speak to, because if you speak in a language that you understand, it'll only go to his head. But the point is, where is the woman? Or where is a non-binary gender? Are you saying that if you talk to a man, only man as a gender is capable enough to be able to change the society or bring about change or have transformation? So पहले में अगर हम कह रहे हैं generic pronoun जब हम use करते हैं, when we write stories, you will see that most people write articles which says, which uses he as a common pronoun, right? So every nurse should take care of her. So nurse is always a woman. While we also have seen references in the hospitals that there are so many men who are in that particular profession. Yeah. So avoiding using he as a generic pronoun. So when you're writing a story about anything for that matter, as an opinion piece, not using he as a main gender, maybe person. So we could still be writing every nurse should take care, or every nurse should take care of their own uniform and not her. Why are we using a gender is equal to certain professions? Remember the fighter pilot, yeah? Or using man as a generic noun. If man represents the whole human race, for example, to make language more, the whole human race, what about women? What about non-binary gender? So how can we use more gender inclusive terms, or language which are gender inclusive? For example, humanity, human beings, people, instead of mankind. Or saying, a cameraman, a businessman, a chairman. Why is it always a man? How can we use more gender specific words? For instance, a filmmaker, or a camera person, or a camera operator, or a police officer for that matter. So how do we break the language, the very language that we're using, not keeping it more, generic to one specific noun, which is man, and breaking the gender specific words, as I said, chairperson instead of chairman. And also describing a woman as her own, so for example, a common term which is usually used when in a political space, when people write or address women, first lady, introduce them as first lady. The lady also has a certain identity. The lady is not an appendage. वो एक add-on नहीं है कि 1+1 free हो गया. Mr. and Mrs. Clinton नहीं है. Right? It is the woman also has a certain identity. She also has a background and has a profession. So how do we make sure that even the woman gets the equal representation in what, and bring about the identity to the forefront and not just keep it her as a band-aid? Yeah. So therefore, language is extremely critical when we're writing the stories. Whose language are you using? For example, very recently there was a article which was written about a killing of two trans women in Pune, and the article was written as transgender. It was only said as transgender. I'm sure in the previous sessions or so, they may have told you about what is the right way of using, but despite of we telling them, the reporter, that it is not transgender. Transgender is an adjective. Transgender person, transgender woman, or a transgender man is the right way of using. Despite that, people would not make change. Yeah. So language matters very critically. Right? So then I want you to I'm also quickly take you to understand what are the real characteristics of inclusive reporting. So I thought I'm going to give you a small anecdote. जब आप report कर रहे हैं, just think about these 6 main elements, why it's important. One is long-term commitment. So inclusion is just cannot be solved overnight. Imagine the evolution. As an Indian culture, we are 5,000-old culture, and all of this internalized patriarchy, the whole brainwashing, whether it is women, men, a non-binary gender, all of us have been brainwashed and with certain belief system. Now, therefore, inclusion cannot be solved in overnight as a problem. And hence, with the same approach, organizations should strategize that future of these topics must include and think about long term. कि जब आप long term सोच रहे हैं, तो how do we bring more diverse voices in the media room, in the newsroom? Yeah, so for instance, Bangladesh had the first transgender woman as an anchor, and it was such a huge thing because the transgender woman is from the Muslim community, which means the intersection of religion, the intersection of gender and sexuality, and breaking the whole stereotype that an anchor cannot be any other gender than a man or a woman for that matter. So thinking about long-term commitment is just not कि अच्छा ये article में लिखना है मुझे, ये औरतों के बारे में लिखना है, तो I'm going and taking opinions from women. ये LGBTQI के बारे में विषय है, तो इसलिए मैं सिर्फ LGBTQI के पास जाकर मैं opinion लेके आऊंगी. No, it doesn't work that way. Long-term commitment means that every article that you think, how can you be more inclusive? Yeah. Also being conscious about your own unconscious bias. So for example, I gave you enough examples. So for instance, कि जब रूरल की जो बातें या कास्ट बेस या रूरल की जो बातें हो रही है, रूरल में जो औरतें होती हैं या LGBTQI कम्युनिटी होती है या फिर एनी अदर डिसएडवांटेज कम्युनिटी होती है, you cannot be a person coming with the urban elite lens and then go and talk to them about ask them about their life stresses. They will never be able to open up because you are also going from a unconscious bias of an elite bias, right? जो elitism हमारे में है for that matter, और काफी अलग अलग किस्म के bias है ना, gender है, age है, racial है, disability है, elitism is also another kind of bias, and religion bias. So how do we make sure that we are conscious about our unconscious bias? Yeah. And then the next being community engagement. One of the major reasons that we have stereotypes, we have prejudice. Prejudice matlab it's a little more serious, a little more actually थोड़ा negative ही होता है, prejudice का connotation negative होता है, which give rise to discrimination across communities या groups के लोगों को. जैसे LGBTQIA community जो होती है उनको पूरी तरह से stigmatize किया गया है as a community for that matter, और या फिर ये भी बोल सकते हैं कि disabled जो लोग होते हैं उनका कोई फ्यूचर नहीं, ये एक बहुत पॉपुलर धारणाएं हैं, इसीलिए उनको रिक्रूट नहीं किया जा सकता, नहीं करते हैं, या फिर रिपोर्टिंग में, जर्नलिज्म में आप you will not find those kind of people with disability for that matter. So engagement with the community is extremely important to break the bias. जब तक आप engage नहीं करेंगे community के साथ, तब आपको समझ में आएगा ये तो हमारे जैसे ही हैं, इनमें और मुझ में कोई फर्क नहीं है, ये भी हमारी तरह से सोचते हैं and all of that. So engagement and networking with the community is very important. The fourth characteristics of inclusive reporting is कि आप क्यों report कर रहे हैं? Are you reporting because it's a fascinating story, it is an entertaining story, or is it something that you want to change the lens, the mindset of the reader who is reading that? And if you're only writing to inform, writing to inform, then it does not make sense at all, because as all of you who have the power of language also have the power to transform the way we are thinking, and hence it's important that you write, that you change the mindset. You write because you want to enlighten people about this, the stigma, the taboo, the stigmatized conversations, or all those difficult conversations which do not happen in the mainstream. So how can I write to enlighten, write to change lens, and not to only inform? Yeah. And the next being decolonization. Decolonization is extremely important when we talk about inclusive approaches, because we've been ruled, I'm sure everybody understands what decolonization, but we've been ruled by the Britishers, and our mindset thinks in a certain way. Okay, so I'm going to, so for instance, एक रिपोर्ट थी उसका मैं आपको डेटा दे रही थी. वन ऑफ द रिपोर्ट्स टॉक्ड अबाउट दैट कि हिंदी न्यूज़पेपर में या फिर इंग्लिश न्यूज़पेपर में जो इवन द पे डिस्पैरिटी इज एक्सट्रीमली हाई, सिंपली बिकॉज we think that articles, news, or opinion pieces which are written in English are far more opinionated, far more intelligent when in compared to any vernacular language, जैसे हिंदी हो या any other vernacular language हो. ओके या फिर जो औरतें जब बायलाइन लिखती हैं, ओके सिर्फ 5% ऑफ द टाइम वो फ्रंट पेज पे आता है. All of this is a decolonized mindset that we think more like Britishers, that it has to be elite, it has to be a certain language, it has to be a certain the way it is perceived. So keeping the decolonized mindset away, that we as a country is extremely diverse. How do we bring our thought processes which are more of the cultural diversity and not get colorized by how the Westerners write report? Okay, so for example, Western media में अगर आप देखेंगे तो इंडिया का वो इंडिया को किस तरह से पोर्ट्रे करते हैं. Have you ever seen the way they portray India? The typical ones ना, वो जयपुर में जाते हैं, वो जो कल्चरल हेरिटेज है वो दिखाएंगे, या फिर एक्सट्रीमली पुअर जो पॉपुलेशन है वहां जाके उनकी अच्छी तस्वीरें निकालेंगे. All of this is decolonized mindset, that you're showing India in a certain manner. Decolonization has to be done so that our colonized mindset is not repeating the same thing which is happening over the years. So decolonizing our mindset. And lastly, holistic approach. I mean, again, if I have to put everything together जो हमने discuss किया है, right from stereotype to prejudice or gender-based roles or patriarchy, or different kinds of biases which show up or manifest when we are writing or reporting for that matter. So holistic approach in the sense that looking at the bigger picture for that matter, and it's and when we talk about the bigger picture, also understand that what impact, emotional impact or mental impact am I really creating through my articles or through my reporting is something that we must look at. And hence it's just not about the article, but how am I impacting the very industry with more diverse and inclusiveness as the character, and add character to the whole industry for that matter. So bringing that holistic approach, and of course it's not a rocket science at all. Inclusion is not a rocket science. All you really need is to look at is that in this room How do I bring, there are 70 people, how do I make sure that all diverse groups are coming together to speak about a certain subject? It's not that difficult at all. Yeah. So these were, I thought that is important for us to think about when we are thinking, when we understand when we want to understand inclusive reporting, for that matter. Okay. So, and lastly, I want to leave you with this thought that the first revolution is when you change your mind and about how you look at things. From yesterday to today, I'm sure there must be multiple and newer information. Jahan pe, even for your own mirrors must have shattered, your own lenses may have changed. So what you see later is the results of that. So, how do we change our lens? How do we change the way we see is what inclusive reporting is all about? Yeah. So that's all I really had for today. So I'll be happy to take any questions if you have about inclusive reporting or pronouns or gender, for that matter. I'll be happy to take it from there.
Lakshmi, thank you, Lakshmi, for that wonderful session. I'm sure, we all know it, but then suddenly when you give the examples, when you ask us to look at ourselves, then we realize how gendered or how biased we are and how much we rely on stereotypes. It is so much convenient, comfortable to, use stereotypes than to make that extra effort to break them and, explore things in a different way. I'm sure all the participants have, benefited from this, and I hope that they all keep these pointers that you have mentioned in mind when they're writing their next report.
Right.
Thank
So
you so
two
much.
hands. Is there time to take questions?
Yes, please.
Yes. Anyone?
Actually, you have 19 minutes for questions.
Okay, sure.
Should I go first? Ganesh here.
Yeah, please.
Hi. So, madam, you talked about how to bring diverse people as experts in our stories, but we in the newsroom are facing issues of lack of contacts or network within with a diverse background. So, do we have any bank or anything like that you are working where the experts from different background we can access and like include them in our stories?
So,
may I answer that? Because we had, I think we have removed it recently, but we had a list of resource persons for various topics, like, for abortion, for sex selection, for violence, for everything. So we had one list on our website, but we can recreate it and share it with you. For various topics like women and politics and different people who are good speakers, who have good knowledge about varied topics. It's not, as Lakshmi has said, it's not necessary for only transgender people speak about only transgender issues, right? There can be a good speaker who has good understanding of issues and who's been working on these issues on politics or on economics or on religion or whatever it is. So we would very much like to, prepare that list once again and put it up on our website. Thanks for reminding us.
I think also apart from that, there are enough organizations who are working with specific issues, right? One, of course, is that don't think about that particular group only when you have that issue from that group. The LGBTQ issues, when you reach out to those resource persons, it's not that. But secondly, there are enough and multiple organizations which are really creating a lot of awareness about all diverse groups, for that matter. So, and it's all available for that instant, and it's easily available. And if you look at Twitter, if you look at LinkedIn, for that matter, there are enough and number of groups that or communities or organizations you will find out who are working in that spaces. Yeah.
Actually, I had one more question. Can I ask?
Yeah.
With respect to this biasness and the colonization and decolonization, I mean, I was just wondering how to keep my indicators on to like just okay. Here is I'm going. I'm have my own bias or I'm like thinking in a colonial terms. Are there any like, okay, these are the red lights that I should keep in mind and work on that?
So as I told you, right, some of the common biases that we really see in media, gender bias. So for example, as simple as so last pandemic, if you go and just look at the articles written about pandemic, how working from home has impacted men versus women, you see that the way a male would have written the very article, he would have highlighted points like women has to work, make sure that all the 3 meals are presented on the table. That's the truth. I understand that. But look at the gender role. A male is only looking from that angle. But a woman is thinking about something else. A woman is thinking that I do not have time and space for myself. But a man is thinking about something else. And that is a gender bias. That a bias is to look at a particular topic, subject, without analyzing, but just going by the popular tone. Housewife means what? Housewife means somebody who's at home, who is just cooking and doing the household chores, but does not require space. All of these are common gender biases. So as I said, gender is one of the bias. Religious is one of the bias. Age bias. Or for example, transgender women dress up in a certain way. If I ask you that how transgender women dress, you will only have one image, which will be that a woman who is extremely feminine, for that matter, with all the ornaments and accessories that she's wearing, and she's on the traffic light. Now that's a common popular image that all of us have. However, if you open your eyes and look at the professional setup or businesses for that matter, many transgender women or transgender men are holding high positions in the organization. They could be heading an HR for that matter. They could be heading a diversity inclusion in bigger organizations like Infosys, KPMG, and all of that. But we don't break that ice. Na? हमको लगा है कि ऐसा ही होता है. Transgender community बहुत बहुत marginalized होते हैं और वो ऐसा ही काम करते हैं, वो पढ़े लिखे नहीं होते हैं. No, that's a bias that we need to break. So being aware about these biases, वो ऐसा नहीं कि bias एक दिन में टूट जाएगा ना. But just when you're writing it, think about it. What is a popular idea that I have?
Lakshmi, may I intervene here?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So, like one good way of checking out is to let somebody who's not at all, who's not from a similar background, read your article, before you publish it. That's like having a sounding board kind of a thing, somebody may raise a question, why, it is, if you're showing it to another man with similar background, he may not be able to find any fault. But if you show it to a woman, or if you show it to somebody who has no background baggage, with regard to gender or something, and then they'll be able to point out. It's always good to share write-ups. I feel it helps me a lot. I share it with, somebody like my son or my husband who have no knowledge about the subject, and send it, ask them to read it, and then they keep circling. What is this? Why is this like that? So it brings in a lot more clarity and a lot more, the expression improves a lot. Why only this? Why not that? Because they are outsiders, they give a better, feedback than people who are like us.
And also taking opinion from the very community. Like for instance, even in our own organization, one of our colleagues is a transgender woman. So when we have to write articles, or a build program which is related to LGBTQIA community, we go back and check with them that, hey, am I coming from a bias? Whether I like it or no, I have a heteronormative lens, right?
Yes.
I think as a cisgender woman. So it will, whether even if how much ever conscious I am, I will have a bias, and I have to go to that group and ask that, look at this and say if there is anything that I'm going wrong. I think it's also important to recognize that and accept that we may not be right all the time, but be open to failing and asking that particular expert from that group is something that will help us to break the bias. I hope that helps.
Yeah.
Srinivas, you've been,
Madam, I am Srinivas from Telangana. Madam, just I want to tell you one thing. We cannot expect unbiased reports without democratizing the systems, especially when we are talking about the institutions. As we know, most of the newspapers and newsrooms are underrepresented by the marginalized communities and Adivasis and Dalits. So in this context, we cannot expect unbiased reports. Most of the times, the social background and the class and the reservations and the merit aspects and the issues comes into the picture, and these aspects influence the reports written by the journalists. So my understanding is take the steps to democratize these institutions to get the clear picture who is representing what, who is talking about whom, whether we are really representing, giving equal representation to these communities who are representing the reporters or not, gender or disability persons. So without democratizing these institutions, it is very difficult to get the democratized reports. That is my observation.
Absolutely, I totally 100% I agree with that, and that's why I said that one of the first characteristics of inclusive reporting is long-term commitment. It is just not one article, one report, or one issue or subject that I'm dealing with, and it is not only about only about women. It is about all those who are on the marginalized sections of the society, including women, people coming from the SC/ST community or Dalit community or Bahujan community for that matter, or religious minority. Everybody are on the intersection. So and I agree that the systems needs to change, but I also think that you and me are also part of the system. And how can I make that small change through my one article, through my one subject, or wherever I have an opportunity to give my opinion? Can I add that small or make that small contribution to the system? But I totally agree that most of the media houses are not democratized and held by a certain section of group. Which needs to be broken, but we have to keep, striving for excellence. So,
thank you.
So we have a question coming in from Anjana George. She's typed it out and she says, "How to handle transphobic male editors with heavy biases on intersectionality and minority gender?"
True. One of the common things that, in fact, all our team, all four women who are in the team, who all come from different groups for that matter, different sections of, religious or social locations. One of the things that we keep doing is constantly call out these biases. So most people don't call out, call out these men who have very derogatory transphobic ideas or homophobic ideas about the community, or even for women for that matter. Calling out is extremely important. Just bystanding, just looking at that particular situation and not calling out is doing disservice to the very profession that you are in. So one is gently calling out and saying that, hey, what you're saying is wrong and why it is transphobic. Sometimes people are transphobic because lack of information could be one of the major reasons. Ignorance could be one of the major reasons that they are transphobic. I also think that just like we are as women or non-binary gender have internalized patriarchy, men are the upholders of patriarchy, right? So how do we break that patriarchal idea and say that what you're saying is transphobic? So being upfront and calling them out could be one of the major things that needs to be done. It is not one day solution. We have to do it consistently, gradually, for that matter. And I also think that media houses should also have workshops and awareness programs about intersectionality. What does intersectionality really mean? Matlab, ek hota hai, people only understand intersectionality on a concept level, but when we talk about praxis, it is not there at all. It needs to be brought into the practice, that everything that I do, does it have a slice? Does it represent the slice of the society? If it is not, it's of no use. So Anjana, I can totally empathize with you. It's very difficult, but we have to call out. And we use this term called allyship. If you are somebody who wants to stand up for diversity and represent diversity and inclusion, you have to be the ally for every marginalized group. You call out the person that, hey, you are being transphobic and this is not the right way of saying, this is the right way of changing. So very recently, one of the political party, made a very well-meaning. The intention was good. They wrote something as a big post and they were, promoting it on the social media, but it was extremely transphobic. We called them out. We said, hey, we understand your intention, but what you've written is wrong. This is the right way of writing something. So you call out. You look at news article, you find something wrong, You call them out, you tell them gently, this is the way it needs to be done. So we change one person at a time. I would say there is no formula to it, but we do it every day. Painstakingly, you become the ally for them.
Thank you for that. We have the next question coming in from Shivangi, and then one more question from Swati, and that's it.
Sure.
So Shivangi, can you just unmute yourself and put your video on as well?
Hey, so first of all, it has been a great session. Thank you for that. I had one minor doubt actually about something that you said towards the end. That is constantly having like a person from a minoritized community as a sounding board for like the articles that people cover. So a little background, I am an agender person, and I have also been active in queer circles and queer activism in like Delhi and also like minorly in Jharkhand for a very long time. And I was actually in the core committee of my university's queer collective. And something that happened quite often is that there would constantly be people like specifically, I'm from Jamia, so specifically MCRC students, the mass communication students, asking the queer collective for inputs on the documentaries that they are making or on the reports that they are doing, or on even the studies, the psychology department people asking us for inputs on the studies that we are doing, that they are doing, right? And while like I understand where that comes from, and while I understand why there is a need to get things reviewed, after a point, we realized that it was a lot of additional labor that we were doing as a queer collective. And like as queer people too, we were just like performing this ton of extra labor, unpaid completely, for allies consistently tell our stories. So like, would you agree that this sounding board method, while really great for the storytelling that an ally does by themselves, it is also problematic to an extent where like after a point, the marginalized person in question might start feeling like they are performing the labor for the ally, while the ally ends up getting all the credit in the mainstream because they are the ones who have access to the stages and to the main platforms.
Yes. Thank you so much for this question. It's so important for us to discuss because unfortunately, since the marginalized group is the expert, because they have lived the experience, right? They have lived experiences of all the oppression and discrimination that they could be going through. Despite all the well-meaning intentions that the allies or the cisgender, heterosexual people may have and want to write about or want to present a story about the LGBTQIA community, unfortunately, the labor has to be done by the marginalized group. And it's not only the LGBTQIA community, even women have to do the emotional labor of teaching the man that, hey, you are wrong, or breaking the stereotype is the emotional labor that we take it. Or the caste community, the Bahujan community or the Dalit community. Unfortunately, we have to constantly keep training and telling the Savarna, the groups that, hey, what you're saying is wrong and why this is important, right? So the emotional burden has to be upon us. And that's the harshest truth. When we talk about intersectionality, and there are multiple papers that you would find, it talks about that the unpaid painstaking burden is always upon the marginalized group. That is one. Two, the other way of looking at is that pushing the group, the privileged group for that matter, to pass on the mic to you consistently, though there are two ways of looking at it, that you teach them, you help them learn or help them unlearn, actually more than learn, help them unlearn, but you also demand that the mic be passed on to you, because even if the ally is well-meaning, they will still have certain biases and there will be a huge thing lost in translation, because that's how we human beings are. It's not the first-hand experience that I'm narrating, and hence demanding that the mic be passed on to you is very, very critical. And that's why if you look at the whole landscape for that matter, there have been enough protests coming from the queer community or the LGBTQIA community, even the allies for that matter, talking about why is a cisgender man was or a cisgender woman was used for playing a character in Chandigarh Kari Aashiki, or for that matter Badai Do. So many films or so many media articles that has been written. So one, yes, the emotional burden is upon us. I agree, but since we want to bring the shift, we will have to do that. And two, also demanding a mic from them is something that we must push as well. I hope that helps.
Swati is waiting on the sideline, but I'm just going to interject and ask one question, which asks, transgender समुदाय के बच्चों के साथ यौन शोषण कैसे समझा जा सकता है? And then Swati and the other questions, we'll forward it to the presenter and she can answer it at her space.
Yeah. देखिए पहले because मैं उस community से नहीं belong करती हूँ, तो मेरा expertise बहुत मतलब उतना एक्सपर्टीज उसमें नहीं है, बट बहुत सारे वेबसाइट्स हैं. फॉर एग्जांपल जहां से मैंने पढ़ाई की क्यूर एफर्मेटिव काउंसलिंग प्रोग्राम, जो मारीवाला हेल्थ फाउंडेशन और टिस के कोलैबोरेशन में एक प्रोग्राम तैयार किया गया है. एक प्लेटफॉर्म है, मारीवाला हेल्थ फाउंडेशन का प्लेटफॉर्म है. अगर आप वहां जाएंगे तो आपको रिसर्च पेपर, रिसर्च स्टडीज specific to the LGBTQI community पे आपको मिलेगा. There are other organizations like Periphery. Periphery is a Chennai-based organization, only works with the transgender persons. So वहाँ पे आपको समझने को मिलेगा कि क्या है. लोगों की धारणाएं ट्रांसजेंडर समुदाय के बारे में बहुत ही लिमिटेड है. उन ट्रांसजेंडर पर्सन्स, उनके लिए जो ट्रैफिक सिग्नल पे खड़ी हुई औरतें होती हैं, बस यही उनका एक इमेज है जो बहुत ही गलत और छोटा सा इमेज है. वो भी एक ट्रांसजेंडर समुदाय का एक छोटा सा हिस्सा है जो हिजरा कल्चर से जो आते हुए हैं, वो वहां के हैं, right? But there's a huge portion of transgender community that a lot of us are unaware about. तो एक ये है कि आप सही प्लेटफॉर्म्स पे जाएं, जैसे पेरिफेरी पे जाएं, या फिर आप मारीवाला हेल्थ फाउंडेशन वाले जो वेबसाइट है वहां पर जाएं. आपको बहुत इंफॉर्मेशन मिलेगा. हिंदी में भी इंफॉर्मेशन उपलब्ध है, वहां पे आपको मिल जाएगा. काफी सारी स्टडीज हैं जो वहां पे पब्लिश की हैं, दोनों भी वहां पे मिल जाएगा आपको.
One last quick question, Swati, please make it really short, and that's it. Thanks.
Yeah, so actually you mentioned that how people need to pass on the mic to the marginalized community. So my question is regarding this only, that when you're working on a story and it is not something related to your community, and you may then what you can do, like of course passing the mic is an option, but what if you don't find somebody from that very community to tell the story, then what would be the solution to it?
Right. So for instance, there are many examples that you will find जहाँ पे ये एक हेट्रोनॉर्मेटिव लेंस है कि वहां से मेरे को उस कम्युनिटी से लोग नहीं मिले. ये एक बहुत ही बड़ा ही बायस है. इसको ब्रेक करना जरूरी है, बिकॉज अगर आप एक्चुअली में सोशल मीडिया पर जाकर देखेंगे, देयर आर इनफ पीपल, टैलेंटेड, मल्टी टैलेंटेड, एक्सट्रीमली इंटेलिजेंट, आइडियोलॉजिकली साउंड, वो समझते हैं वो कहाँ से आ रहे हैं. हमको उनको ढूंढना है. ओके, एक बड़ा सा इशू है जो हेट्रोनॉर्मेटिव लेंस जब आते हैं तो वो नहीं दिखता है. जैसे सवर्णा को लगता है कि हमको सारी चीजें पता है, या फिर सिस जेंडर्ड पर्सन को पता है कि अच्छा हम ही विमेन के बारे में लिखेंगे, हम ही LGBTQ के बारे में लिखेंगे. सो फॉर एग्जांपल एक बहुत ही हाल ही में एक छोटा सा प्रोग्राम हो रहा था जो पीपल विद डिसेबिलिटी के साथ हो रहा था, और वहां पे सिर्फ एक ही पर्सन टोकनिज्म के तौर पर उनको लाया गया, पर बाकी चीजें तो सब सिसजेंडर एबल्ड पर्सन बात कर रहे थे. So that's the point, right? One is you have to really look for people, and let's say for the sake, hypothetically, if you've not got the people, you cannot you have to find people to be able to at least give you opinion pieces, or at least give their opinion about their feedback, about their views, and use that to make to write your own story. I would say that pushing your opinion and making it as a center or core of the article is problematic. I hope that you get it. You don't make your opinion as the center of the story. Okay, you are on the sideline. Always remember that when you're dealing with the marginalized community, you are on the side. You have to be on the side. You have to move away and make space for everybody else's, the marginalized opinion, to come to the center. I think that could be done when we don't have people who represent the community. Pass the mic or make space and, be on the sideline. Don't take the limelight, which is a very cisgendered Savarna lens that we operate from.
Thank you.
Right.
Well, thanks, Lakshmi. Such an interesting session, and it gives us an overview of the various aspects of inclusivity. Thank you so much. So participants, this completes all our sessions, and we hope you enjoyed them and learned as much as all of us and taken notes. I would now like to invite Dr. Sharda to talk about this year's program and what is required as a next step. So please hold on. Dr. Sharda, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for this opportunity. And yeah, I hope you have a great session. And I'm going to just leave my email address here, just in case if you want to reach out to me about any questions about diversity and inclusion, I'll be happy. Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Lakshmi. And it was a wonderful session. And today, in fact, all the sessions were so very informative and enlightening. And I'm sure all the participants have benefited from the sessions. And if you have any further questions, any further requirements of information, please do feel free to write to us what kind of sessions you would like to have, training programs. And we'll see if we can, organize some of those training programs for you. And yeah, we'll be sending you an application registration form and what you call feedback form. Please fill it up, because to make our programs better, to understand whether we are successful in our objective of reaching out to you with new information, new insights, is successful or not, we need your frank and genuine feedback from you. So please do write back to us, write in the chat box or write in the feedback form that we are going to share. It is very, very valuable to you. Good or bad, ugly, we don't mind, but give us your feedback. That is my earnest request to all of you. And yeah, as I told you earlier, we will be having one. You can submit your storylines now that you have heard all the speakers talking about how to write stories on 4 different subjects. Pick up any of the subjects and send us storylines. You have to send 4 storylines to us, and based on the storylines, we'll be selecting the fellows. So please keep writing good stories. Be engaged in social, social issues. Make a difference. That is what I expect from you. That is what my aspiration for you. Like, we should be able to do. You should be good change makers. You should be really social transformers. That's what I look at you. That's what I want from you, and that is what Laadli has been working on for so many years, because I feel there is a lot of hope, and we can make a difference. And tomorrow is Holi, festival of colors. Be safe, play well, and then have nice sweets and festivities, time with your family and friends. And I hope this year will be better, and we'll all be back to our normal ways of life. And this new normal, I think, needs to get back to our original normal anyway. So let's see. I hope to see you all in person next time at a workshop. And so thank you so much, and bye.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Sharda. So
thanks, Dr. Sharda. Malti, just 1 minute. I'm sorry to be cutting you short.
Please take over.
Yeah, no. It's just that a lot of people are asking for recordings for yesterday. So please know we've sent out emails with yesterday's recording, and we will be doing similar thing by tomorrow and sending you all the application forms and the requisite, material for you to be able to send us applications, right? Okay, thank you. Thanks, Malti. Over to you.
Thank you. So we are now at the end of the program, and definitely would like to thank all of you for your enthusiasm. I would like to thank all the speakers, Sridhar Rangayan, Dr. Kalpana Apte, Lakshmi Sreenivasan, for the day. what they have done for us today, interesting talks, as well as the team of Population First. Most of all, a huge note of gratitude to Dr. Sharda for her continuous support and guidance. I cannot end this program without thanking the Norwegian Embassy in New Delhi and UNFPA India for their unflinching support for this edition of the fellowships, as well as many more things that come for us as their support through the year. Lastly, on behalf of Population team, the Population First team, we wish you all a very happy Holi. Stay safe. Thank you.